first thing I saw that really caught me off was we had a pilot. She was the first F-14 Tomcat pilot. Her call sign was Revlon. As I recall, I was not physically on the roof when it happened. I was watching
on the flight deck.
I was on the plat. I was watching on the plat. I was in the shop. We have a 27-inch TV with a tube TV down there or whatever. And when flight operations were on, all shops had to have the plat on. So the platform's a series of it was over 30 cameras, I believe, from all different angles of the ship. Some from up high, some from literally built into the deck to film from all different angles. So when aircraft are being recovered or pilots are coming in to land, you can see the aircraft as it comes in. And I just happened to be looking at the plat for some odd reason. There was a lot of I'll say it. There was probably a lot of there was certainly a lot of hope tied to for a lot of females.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Being the first, Kara Holtgren was her name.
Yeah,
And she came in and they said, power, power. And she rolled off to one side and there was this big splash. And I was like, fuck does that mean? I remember thinking to myself,
now what?
And they were like, oh, she's gone. And I was like, what do you mean gone? They were like, she's gone. And I was like, that girl just died? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, this ain't no bullshit.
Right.
Right? You know what I mean? That's because it was so shocking and matter of fact all at the same time. And that was just so
surreal.
Yeah, it was just wait a minute. She's gone?
Yeah.
Right? So you're basically when you're in the catwalk, you're standing looking at the flight deck at chest level, everything's above. That's it, right? So, and I stepped up and I put my foot on the flight deck and I heard boom. And I went, what? Right? And I saw this yellow white flash go whoa, like this across, and I was like, what the fuck? And then I heard the aircraft siren, the collision alarm go, aircraft siren. And I was just there was this immediate, how, all that shit we do in basic training when you do firefighting training or whatever. It was just almost instantly I was back in the catwalk again, firing up a AFFF hose, you know what I mean? And a bunch of motherfuckers around me all of a sudden. I was like, whoa, this is, it was intense.
Yeah.
And because I jumped back down in the catwalk and I looked, you could see from the whole landing area, from the front to the back, the whole aircraft carrier was on fire, the whole thing. And I see this cat going like this. He's falling, right? He's only a couple feet from me. And I drop the hose I'm faking and I snatch him by his fucking float coat. And I chuck this dude like Hulkamania, dude. I don't know where that energy came from. And he went flying and he kind of landed halfway, not on his side, but partially. And he popped up and his goggles was all crooked. And he looked at me and he was like, ugh, you know what I mean? And then he ran. I realized that dude would have went over the side.
Yeah.
I think it was 2011, the end of 2011, we officially closed Patriot Facilities Management, you know what I mean? And what I didn't know was an operations guy that I'd brought on that I considered my friend behind the scenes had negotiated a deal to take over some clients that I didn't know about and was cleaning those clients. And so basically there was money being made that whole time. It just wasn't being made by me. It had been stolen and I didn't know it. And while I was working for a company in 2012, found that out.
Sonoma.
Yeah,
I was close.
Right, you know what I mean? Actually, a guy who used to work for me called me and said, hey, you know what I mean? How come you're not in business anymore? And then in that conversation, dropped the name of somebody that used to work for me that he was still working with. And then I was like, wait a minute, that guy worked with me.
Yeah, you started putting
hold
it
up.
together.
And then eventually me and that guy are sitting down across from each other in a restaurant. And that's when he cops kind of an attitude and tells me that, you know what I mean, I don't see myself ever working for you again. And I realized that the reason why he's saying that is because he's got my money. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Now, over time, I've realized that, who's more guilty, the person that steals from you, or when you are so incapable of being able to see somebody steal, you're basically lining them up. Like I told him too much, and I set him up for, you know what I mean, and connected him with relationships, and gave him the rope to hang me with, and then I was mad because he hung
you with him,
right? So, but to take away from that conversation was, I'm going back. So I relaunched, the next version of Patriot, and being pretty much leashed to, staying high at all times, you know what I mean, and chameleon, hiding it as best as I possibly could until you're with somebody that's not living that lifestyle, you know what I mean, and that was my, my now wife, seeing that remember her looking at me and being like, can't you just stop that just for a little while?
Right.
And the answer was no, I can't. And that was when I started to really realize. So one day I went to a 12-step recovery meeting, and, and got my hand up, and, I've been clean ever since. It's been
like 9.5,
11
and a half,
11 years. So, so I continued to sell commercial cleaning, you know what I mean, and build relationships with clients, and got back to restaurants first because it was just an area that was kind of like, I already had some existing relationships, even though they had been gone for 4 or 5 years. And, but there were people that I knew, and it was real hard, but I started and started to accumulate clients. And then those clients became bigger and bigger over time until at some point, just a year or two later, I had eclipsed what the largest I had been when I had been in my first company. And it was just basically, with a shoestring of me and, and some people just helping me. And here we are for Dancing on a Volcano, Season 2, Episode 2, or this would actually be Episode number 9. Here today with Dave Daniels, but this is a little bit of a special episode. Special, kind of cool, not special, right? And so, the request that I've been getting since we started Dancing on a Volcano has been for me to switch positions and be the interviewee. So we shot an episode of Dancing on the Volcano yesterday with Dave in the hot seat. And Dave and I have been friends for 30 years. So in conversations, we made a decision that there would probably be nobody more qualified to interview me and put me on the hot seat than Dave Daniels. So without further ado, we will switch seats and we're going to rock this thing.
Let's do it.
First thing I'm going to say is, oh, shit.
Good morning, my brother.
Here it is.
Yeah, it's on.
Officially on. So,
yeah.
Love you, man.
Love you too, my man.
All right. So,
ready to get this show on the road?
Yeah, absolutely. So, no better time, no better place, no better person than with you. So, you know what I mean? It's an honor and privilege to share the room with you on either side.
Absolutely.
Right. And yesterday was a lot of fun.
It was.
We talked about trying to not fit 100 pounds of shit into a 5-pound bag here, right? But at the same time, there's going to be quite a bit. I'm sure we're going to go down that path. You know what I mean? So, we've been through some really difficult and hard times together. We've also been through some, wonderful, great times. We survived. Both
True.
of us have been to the edge of Volcano and back. So, so I'll leave it to you. I mean, where do you want to start?
Start with your story, man. Tell me how you got to the Navy, where we met. Start it right there, man, because there's some fun in that right off the bat.
Oof. A gift of desperation, right?
We were both there.
Well, so I'm a small town boy from a little town, steel town in Pennsylvania called Conshohocken. And
I remember the first time you said that, I was like, what?
What? I get that a lot, right? Somebody said one time that Conshohocken in Indian means, where the hell am I? So, from a, modest upbringing, intelligent, loving parents, I'm the first of 2 children, and I was an only child for a decade. So, a great childhood at home, well loved, reasonably isolated, challenging childhood in school and with peers. But by the time I went to college, I was well on a path to trying to escape myself. And, that dis-ease, not feeling comfortable with who I was able to chameleon up with just about any group that I was with. And, of course, and we touched on this yesterday, the exploration of substances was, probably was the sport in the college I went to, because I went to art college. So there was no, there was no basketball, there was no baseball, there was no football.
Right.
There was get high.
Right.
There was a lot of that. And not everybody there partook. So for the record, just because you went to art college didn't mean you
Right.
turned in to be a junkie. But
Right.
it was definitely like part of the playbook. And, so I dropped out of art college after a year. And, I was in my first serious relationship with somebody who, I was head over heels with. And, after I dropped out, I got a couple jobs and I wasn't really doing very well. And I'm not necessarily going to say that. I was doing okay. But, I probably, in the interest of transparency, probably wasn't a very good boyfriend at that age. I was too busy. I was immature,
Yeah.
and she met a 35-year-old balding pharmacist who also had a connect like no connect anybody I ever knew had. And for me, at I think probably 18 or 19 years old, and my girlfriend at 18 or 19 years old, I just could not compete.
You can
with
compete
that.
with that,
Right. And not to be fair, he probably also had more maturity, more juice, a lot of other things that I didn't have as well.
Doubloons.
Yes, without question. Financially more capable and, had a better lifestyle than I did. And, and I came to find out, in a way that was pretty painful. You know what I mean? Like I found out, I observed what happened, and basically I came to realize things that I was being told were not as they were. And when I approached her, she busted me out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what did you want me to tell you? She played softball and,
Got it.
and, her and her best friend, it was her best friend's that played softball with, it was her older brother. And, she said, I'm going to go down the shore with my girl, you know what I mean, for the weekend, and left me basically to work, living in our little South Philly apartment together. And that Sunday, she was supposed to be back to be on the field to play. And I went and I'm sitting in the bleachers and I don't see her, but I see her sister on the field. And I'm like freaking out, like, what up? And then I go back to my apartment and then she comes home later and she says, what did you want me to tell you? I went down the shore with her brother instead of blah, blah. And I was like, dude, I was crushed. And, I think like a week or 2 weeks later, she moved out to get her own place. And I remember sitting like 3/4 of a block away, enough so I could see the house, but not enough so that maybe she could see me, and just the tears streaming while I watched her carry all her stuff out the crib. And then, but once she moved out, my posse moved in. Right, it was basically the South Philly Italians who took me in, because I am Italian. My last name's Italian. I'm half Irish on my mother's side, but Dinardo is my last name. And they were like, paisan. So they immediately like took me in as one of their own. And, and of course we partied a lot in that place. And, it was the first place that I really tried to, to supplant the pain and because of my background and my history, I had, an underlying feeling of, maybe not being enough. And, if anything, that breakup, broke me.
Yeah. It pushed
because
that
it just reinforced
Correct.
that, that sensation that I wasn't enough really was true.
Right.
And I was off to the races. It was just like, what drugs could we do? There's always a little bit of a apprehension. And what I mean is, that I wasn't quick to I mean, yeah, you know, we did plenty of LSD and, you know what I mean? Like we smoked a ton of pot and, you know what I mean? We did whatever. But there was just some things that I did where I felt like I like this so much that if I do it, it won't stop. So I kind of avoided that. And there were some sensations that other people enjoyed that I did not. Like when we did cocaine, right? We sat around and all did cocaine. We never really had enough money to get much in the way of cocaine.
Right.
So we would get a little cocaine, and then it would be like,
we ain't got no doubloons.
yeah, we got to get more cocaine. And then it would be like, who do we go to get the cocaine? And then the whole thing, you know what I mean, would turn into a, you know, just basically an adventure. And that was the first time where, like, I remember one time going to a crack house with one of my boys, and because he was trying to score some shit.
Like where I left you in the
Yeah,
car.
yeah, right, exactly. And, you know, and it was just it was basically in a, you know, I want to say an abandoned. It probably wasn't at that level yet, but clearly there were a bunch of people living in one house that,
Right.
you
Not
know,
quite a trap house yet.
yes, it was close. You know what I mean? Pretty close. And there, you know, and that was the first time that I saw like a crackhead titter by, like, you know what I mean? with that, you know, hollow look on their face, like, yo, can I get some, you know,
Right.
You're right.
White
And I was
powdery
just like,
lips
I
and
was like,
shit.
wait, what is
What's up?
what is exactly what's going on here?
Right.
So, so I'm living in this spot in South Philly, right? You know, I'll tell this because this ties into some other stories. So, I'm on the second floor at 1628 South 8th Street in Philadelphia. So I'm across the street from a little Chinese restaurant called JC's Chinese Restaurant. Like the day I moved in, I used to like to move into a place and literally with no furniture, like I said, Indian style, and smoked a joint in my bedroom with the windows open. Right. And with nothing yet, you know what I mean? My girl had not moved in yet. It was just me. We had just signed a lease from a guy by the name of Demetrius Christodoulou. Still remember his name to this day. And and so that first night I'm sitting there Indian style, my windows open, no furniture yet, no nothing. And I hear this, ooh, fighting outside. And I look out the window and I see these two guys come by, these two big dudes come by, and this little small dude, and they come by and they're like, you know, and they kind of get in this little like fist fight, and they just hit this dude, and he went down, and then they went walking. I don't think they wanted any trouble or whatever, and they got about 3/4 of a block to a block away, and then this kid standing like literally in front of my apartment, like I'm watching this whole thing. He tears his shirt off, and he's like, "You come get me," you know what I mean? Like, you guys ain't shit. I'm like, those guys were like 3 times his size. I still remember the guys' names to this day. One guy went by Mongi. The other guy was Buckwheat.
All right, keep going.
Mongi
and Buckwheat.
I found that out later.
Sounds good.
Like, they used to hang at the local bar at the corner, and Mongi and Buckwheat came by, and I don't know exactly what happened, but they kind of skirted past him real quick and then went to walking. And he walked about a half a block and then collapsed in front of JC's Chinese Restaurant, bleeding out his side. He got shanked.
I didn't even know.
I was like, that dude just got shanked in front of my new crib. This is a crazy place I just moved into, right? You know what I mean? So
you ain't even moved in yet.
Not literally, like not a piece of furniture yet. Like, you know, I got a backpack and I'm sitting Indian style, right? So we moved in. I lived there a little while. When she moved out, you know what I mean? Like, of course, I was having difficulty. Like, I work for a guru bookstore in South Philly, right, on South Street, a place called Garland of Letters, where he sold crystals and new guru books and space music and, you know, and all that kind of ambient house music and all this stuff. And I left that job. Fired probably, if I recall correctly, because they put me on a schedule and I didn't show up one day because I got confused and they fired me, and I was like freaked out. So I went to, I was into electronics, always was, stereos specifically. I was like, ooh, you know what I mean? Like that shit just was like, that was like man porn to me. Yeah. So there was this place on 19th and Chestnut in Philadelphia. It was called Brimoire Stereo. Brimoire is like a high-end area. Right?
Yeah,
and I was like,
keep going. I remember this.
And I went, one day I walked in there and asked them if I could get an application. And the general manager came in, this guy, really articulate, dark-skinned fellow, just smooth as glass. He slid in and he said, what makes you think you can sell stereos? And I said, it's my understanding that when you learn how to sell one thing, you can sell anything. And he said, all right, why don't you show up tomorrow and, we'll start you out. We'll give you a shot. So he had an assistant manager, a guy by the name of Ira, right? Ira had a little, I think Ira did too much nose candy he had a little store down in Florida that he had to close and move up. So he was running so he was the assistant manager and this guy, I'll eliminate his name, but so I worked there for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then one day the police came and locked up the general manager. So here he had found his way to smoking rocks, right? So, these things we had, these things we had, they were like, highly valuable items. And he found out that, if maybe these new things they call camcorders went out the back door in exchange for rocks, right? You know what I mean? That, he could keep like whatever action he had going on with some, local skis and whatever he had. So suddenly the assistant manager became the general manager. A new guy became the assistant manager. And I became like the young kid who was just trying to learn. Right. So I took a shine to Ira. He was too old to be an older brother, but he was too young to be an uncle. He was like somewhere in the middle. I think at that age, he was probably maybe 40 and I was 20. And there were a couple other guys, but I had keys to the store and I would go in there and, and we did a lot of drugs, you know what I mean? Because you're selling stereo equipment, you know what I mean? It was like, it wasn't a hindrance. It would be like, wow, that sounds really good, you know what I mean? But I took a shine to learning about how to sell. Right. You know what I mean? Like that was interesting to me was the psychology of selling. And, Ira would watch me. So he would watch somebody come in to buy some audio equipment and he watched me talk them into and then back out of buying some equipment. So he would like stand behind the register or stand back in the corner and listen to me talking and then do this thing where he would like put his hand over his mouth to kind of tell me to shut the fuck up.
Right.
And, and I started really learning from him. And, and there were times where, towards the end, I was selling. I think there was one point where out of all the stores that they had, I think they had 13 locations. I was like number 2 salesperson. And the number 1 salesperson was a guy who sold more audio equipment every month than anybody. So to even be in the same category, was like a big deal. Right. And got fired from that joint.
There might be a trend.
But so here's the thing, right? So they would say, like, so at one point these camera crews came in because they were like doing a story. All right, so they came in asking about these acoustic monitor Johns, and I was like, you get what you get. And then suddenly I'm fired, and I'm looking through the newspaper, and there's an article for stereo sales, and I was like, oh, imagine that. So the place was in more of an industrial area. So I'm like, so I go in and there's this little like shoddy office and there's like all this, there's these speakers absolutely blasting, these shitty ass speakers. And I'm like, and I look down in the corner, it says acoustic monitor on them. And I'm like,
that's the shit from the van.
This is the shit from the joint. So I go out and there's a warehouse full of just speaker boxes to say acoustic monitor on them. The floor to ceiling, there must have been 1,000 pairs. And industrial full on commercial level basketball hoop with the joint that came down, the whole hydraulic thing. So it was almost like it was in. And there was these 2 guys, and they were betting $1,000 a pop on sinking a basket. I was like, these, I don't know what's going on here, but I ain't never seen nobody's bet on this. So I was like, so they gave me the gig. So the gig was you rode around in the van, and they gave me a guy who'd train me. So I sat in the passenger seat, and I already wasn't really comfortable as it was, you know what I mean, like in my own skin. And the job was that you rolled down the window of your truck and you say, yo, man, you want some big speakers for your house? Pull over, check them out. And you would, and you would, you know what? And you'd pull somebody, and yo, man, I don't know what to do. We're gonna, you know what I mean? Like there was an extra speakers in the back of the truck. There's one more. There's one more than was on the manifest. And when we take them back, they're gonna take them back. So you know what I mean? You're just trying to get some money for them. You know what I mean? Look, they got them polypropylene woofers on them. And just, you know what I mean? Like, you know, like what can you get out of your ATM machine right now? Can you get, you know what I mean? And that was like basically the thing. And they were legitimate speakers, and they weren't
junk.
They weren't junk, but clearly they weren't worth what you were charging people for them. And you would go to somebody's ATM machine and they would get whatever they could. So one day we tried to put the speakers in somebody's car that I sold, and the guy, we got both of the speakers in. We were supposed to get both of the speakers in and then us in so we could go to the ATM machine. And we got the second speaker in, and there was no room for me. So he closed the door and said, hey, listen, follow me to the ATM machine. And then we followed in the van, and as soon as he got in front of us, he jammed on. So we're chasing him. He crashed the car and rolled it up over this fence, and you know what I mean? And it took everything I had. You know, the guy I was with wanted to hit him, and I just wanted to get the speakers back out of his car. Sure, right. You know, while I was like, you get what you get for doing that. Right. So, and he tried to lose us in my hometown. We were in Conshohocken. You know, he tried to take a back road in my shit. You know what I mean? It was like a mistake.
He back road and passed your house.
So meanwhile, you know what I mean? Like I hadn't paid my rent. You know, Demetrius Christodoulou was probably looking for me. I had the guy who moved in on the third floor above me was really quiet. Turned out, I don't know what he did. His last name was Rudy, and his brother was a loan shark. And so he found out that, and he was cool with me. And one day he was like, he loaned me some money so I could pay my rent or whatever. And then I moved out real quietly a month later and didn't say anything. So moved back to Conshohocken, moved back into my parents' house. And I was there for a couple of weeks until my mom was like, you best go get a job. You know what I mean? So I put on like some nice clothes, and I walked down to this car dealership. And I walked in, and I used that same thing. They said, what makes you think you can sell cars? And I said, well, and I told them, you know, it's my understanding once you learn to sell one thing, you learn to sell anything. And they gave me a gig. And I sold new cars for a little while, and then they moved me to used cars. And I love selling used cars. And the reason why was because as a almost 21-year-old kid, they let me have a demo, any kind of demo I wanted. So they gave me a dealer plate. So I would go out on the lot, and there would be like 50 cars, and I'd be like, yo, let me rock this Monty SS. And I'd have my thing. And then the next day I was in a Peugeot, you know what I mean? And it was like, so in South Philly, to all my peeps that I hung out with every day, they never knew what I was going to ship. That was like the thing. They were like, what's he going to be riding in today? You know, I'd pull up in my whatever demo I was
that day. Right.
Until I started smoking and crashing cars. And they kept downgrading my John. So at the beginning it was like, you know, they gave me a car. I crashed a 5-liter Mustang, 5-speed. I lost control of it on an on-ramp going to the city, and they towed it away or whatever. I did some damage to it, and they gave me another car. And then when I crashed that car, then they gave me this little tiny three-cylinder, you know what I mean, like 5-speed.
You have been downgraded.
That was embarrassing to ride in, and you know what I mean? And so, but it was right around the time that the first Gulf War conflict happened. They were shooting Scuds, and you know, it looked like we were going to go to war, and nobody walked into car dealerships for like weeks. And I was like, meanwhile there, during that time, like I was painting the name of the dealership on the side of the building as like a side thing. So they would, you know, keep me around.
Keep you around, right. I mean, you got some stuff going on.
But I just really saw, I went from making some decent money to making almost no money at all. And meanwhile, I felt like it was just a matter of time until I got locked up. You know, I caught a DUI or whatever. Like it was just, you know,
or some bullshit.
Yeah, my activity and my lifestyle was just not sustainable. And I think somewhere along the line, I somehow I knew that. So one day I went down to in Norristown, they had which was right around the corner, the local place. They had Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. And I walked in, and funny thing was, my father had flat feet, so he tried to enlist in Nam, and they rejected him because they couldn't get one of them real thin metal rulers up underneath his feet. So You know,
I'm
so,
familiar.
Yeah. So really, and in those days they rejected you for that.
Correct.
So I might not be alive today if it wasn't for that, because he was trying to avoid the draft. He figured he'd get in a little early before, and maybe he could pick where he went instead of.
Correct.
So the only really people that I knew that had been in the service were both of my grandfathers, and neither of them talked about it that much. But I remembered my mother's father, my pops, and he was a howitzer gunner in World War II, and he fought through Italy and then fought through North Africa and in Italy. He used to say that I met Mussolini one time, but he was hanging upside down. And he said, you know, them Navy guys, they had it really good. You know, 3 square meals and a warm rack to sleep in.
Yep.
So when I went and saw Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, all 4 signs in the hallway, I walked in the Navy recruiting office. So they got talking to me. I graduated high school in 87, and we're in basically like the summer of 1990. So my ASVAB record still existed, right? Now, I was not really heavily partying when I was in high school, but I'm learning disabled. I have dyslexia and other things. So I struggled with school, but I'm reasonably intelligent, and I had a decent SAT score, and, you know, my ASVAB score was pretty strong. So he looked and said, oh, you're 1 point below of being a nuke. You can go take the ASVAB again, and if you score 1 point higher, you can be a nuke. And I was like, well, what's a nuke? And he was like, you run a nuclear reactor on a ship or on a submarine. I was like, well, where do they work? And he was like, on a ship
or
and I was like, no, like where on the ship? And he was like, oh, in the ship. And I was like, well, I had saw Top Gun. Right. I don't want to be nowhere near the whole ship, or let alone a submarine of all things. Right. And I was like, you know, and he was like, well, what I didn't know was that he had like a mandate, like he had a certain, you know,
there was quotas
that he had to hit, and the number one thing he was trying to hit for everybody was nuke. If you could get me to be a nuke, that was a feather in his cap.
Right.
And he said, well, how about AT? And I said, well, what's that? And he said, aviation electronics technician. I said, you work with aircraft? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, he said, but the thing I got here is 6 years. He didn't tell me that I could have done what you did. There was no option for 4 or 6. He didn't put that shit out there. Again, he was probably getting his quota, right? You know what I mean? So he served it up like a burger and fries for 6 years, and I signed on the dotted line. So I remember going back to the dealership. There was a lunch break. And
you flew over there on a lunch break to talk to the Maps Cats?
Yeah, and signed up all my shit. So I went back, and the GM from the dealership was like, you did what? And I was like, yeah, I signed up for the Navy. So I was on, you know, delayed entry program.
Yep,
so
me too.
Basically I took that next month or two and, you know, proceeded to party it down pretty hard. And I went in October 29th, 1990. And, you know, I arrived the 30th. I think it was like, I actually remember that I arrived, and my first like full day was Halloween. I was in San Diego for basic.
For Halloween.
Yeah. So that's how I ended up in the Navy. It was kind of like, you know, there was a gift of desperation. You know what I mean? And, you know, I think somewhere along the line, I knew that, you know, I was going to, I would need to check myself before I wrecked myself. And you know, one of the, you know, a turning point in my life, one of the best decisions I ever made. Frankly, we would have never met. And,
right.
You know what I mean? I never would have saw what I saw or did what I did. Was it not for that?
Right.
And I never really regretted the service that I chose. You know what I mean? Like, there were aspects of the other services, you know what I mean? Like, the Marine Corps uniforms had like that sharp little blue with the red line. I dug that, you know what I mean? And I come to find that, you know, that wasn't the service for me. I found that out later the hard way by, you know, interfacing with a lot of Marines.
With the Marines, right.
Yeah, well, when we were in boot camp in San Diego, right, MCRD was right next to Recruit Training Command San Diego. So they were literally like not right next door, but really close. Well, what happens, they shut down their chow hall to rebuild it. So we would be going into the chow hall in the morning, and when we were literally like popping tall out of our racks early in the morning, you would hear these like, they were like cattle trucks coming in, and they were unloading these cats from MCRD. So we would go to the chow hall, and they would line us up, not the butt, coming in the thing, and they would line up the Marine Corps cats. Well, that was right when I realized that I was in the right service, because they were screaming at these dudes, man, like bloody mad. It was like, whoa! I like my hair was still long, and I was standing in line at the chow hall. And I might have said this at one of the other episodes here, but I'm standing in the chow line, and I'm like this, right? And you're not supposed to look to the side or whatever, because you get yelled at. And I'm just trying to like nut the butt and waiting to get my tray. Right? So I'm still standing outside, and these Marine Corps cats come flying in, and they're next to us, and they're standing in line just like we are. You know what I mean? Like I'm in my blue sweatsuit with the Navy thing, because I haven't even got my hair cut yet. You know what I mean? As new as they get. I think it was first or second day eating.
Recruit.
Yeah. Blueberries, baby. It was blueberries. And these Marine Corps cats in line, and for whatever reason, I broke rank and kind of looked to the one side to just look at the cat. It was because to see the fear in his eyes. Right. He was fucking scared. And he must have like saw me looking at, just glance at him, and decided to glance back. And this Marine Corps DI come fly, this Diesel brother, dude. He was like, bam, you know what I mean, with his flat. And he come flying past me, butt through me in the line between me and the other guy, and was like bouncing his rim bill of his hard hat and the side of his head above his ear, while he screamed so loud, little pits of spittle was hitting him in the face and shit. And I was like, oh yeah, Navy. that was the move. You know what I mean? Like we had it hard, but them cats, they were getting next leveled. Yeah. So so that was it. And and basic training went from difficult to fun. You know what I mean? Like it was the first level of like, there was a camaraderie that went along with that. You know what I mean? And still to this day, I remember people that I met there, and you know what I mean? And I'm still connected to one or two basic training. I'm get at least one person on my Facebook that that I'm connected to this day. You know what I mean? So I was really glad for that. You know what I mean? Like I had no idea, we weren't fleet sailors, you know what I mean? Like, and there's 15 stories, the basic training stories that go along with that, you know what I mean? But, it was definitely like a rite of passage that led me to, 6 years in the service, and, some guys didn't make it. Some guys, disappeared or rocked out or, and couldn't hack it or whatever,
or did some stupid stuff and got kicked out, right? Or got pulled back to start over.
I mean, we did some stuff like we broke protocol in a couple different ways. That type of thing. Got you in these days. You say get your chit pulled. Yep. You know what I'm saying? Got my chit pulled. Yep. You know what I mean? And got sent to marching party.
Yeah, man. Got mashed.
Got mashed. Yeah. I did tell you that story. You know what I mean? Like, I ever tell you the marching party story?
Go ahead. I don't think you did.
So it's like 2 weeks before Christmas, maybe something like that. You know what I mean? So
hold up. The funny thing is, you and I were doing the same things in parallel, right? You were in San Diego, as I was in Chicago.
Except you were shoveling because it was around Christmas time.
Correct.
Right. So you were like,
correct, straight shoveling.
Right. So it's like 2 weeks before, maybe 2-3 weeks before Christmas. And so we had two company commanders. Yep. A company commander, his name was Senior Chief Vader, right? Right. And he was tough as nails, Senior Chief, right? You know what I mean? Like red stripes. So he got in trouble back in the day. You know what I mean? He didn't have no gold stripes or nothing. He was red stripe. Right. And he had been there and we were his last command before he went back to the fleet. And the new chief that came in, his name was Chief Kemp. He was this smooth brother, cool, right? You know what I mean? Like, of course, they were both hard because they had to be with us. But you're right. And this was his first command. So they dogged us, but they taught us a lot. And then towards the very end, like those very last 3 or 4 weeks before it was the end, they kind of like backed off on us little by little. And
you turned into a person again, not just a recruit.
Yes. And, I was EPO. I was educational petty officer. So I was like teaching people shit, you know what I mean? And I was also like painting the flags that we flew in front when we marched.
That guide on.
The guide on, exactly. So, and I had like a posse or a crew that would like, and they like wheeled in a TV like the last week or two before, you know what I mean, into the company commander's office.
Right.
And we would like, watch a little, maybe even a little TV, which is unheard of. Like
right.
we had this skate set up. And we got to talking one day and they were like, yo, man, do you think maybe we can get some ghee dunk? Well, for the audience, ghee dunk is like snacks, right? Because we didn't have access to no snacks.
Correct.
So, so I was like, so everybody found out what we were doing. They gathered up a nice pile of cash just for a couple people to go see if they could get to the store and make a run. So, well, the store that they had, you weren't allowed to be there if you were a recruit. That was for like, staff, right, whatever. So they gathered up some money, and me and like two other guys, we got sent to go to the store or whatever. So we in the store and stuff, and we're up at the counter or whatever, and we got like a big old pile of like gummy worms.
You got 90 dudes
chippy chips and whatever,
right.
some sodas. And this, brown shoe, khaki, E7 or above came up and took one look at us and was like, we
what
must
are you
have
guys
been
doing
screaming
here?
like,
Right.
we don't belong in here.
Way out of
and
place.
he reached over and unbuttoned my button on my shirt and was like, pulled out my shit. I was like, oh, shit. This is not going to be
This ain't good.
So, of course, that made it back to, to our company commanders. And so nothing was said. So
that's almost not good.
I found out right beforehand. So Christmas Eve, we got sent to get mashed. And they sent us to the SEALs.
Oh, extra special mash.
Yes. The SEAL team ran marching party and short tour. So, and I had heard horror stories about the way these guys worked you out. Like he was gonna
because cats got in trouble and got sent.
Yes,
and then
right.
Came
and they came back and
was
were like, dude, don't do that.
get
Right? So I'm like, and Christmas Eve. So they sent us. So we marched over there in the evening, and it was already dark, and we marched over and we got to the joint, right? So there were a couple, diesel cats standing there, and they got all these numbers painted on the
floor in the gym or wherever.
No, it was like outside.
Oh, you guys were outside on the
These
ground,
cats were like, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good. So they were like, everybody pull up a number. So I was standing on a number, and I had heard that they weren't going to let you go anywhere unless that number was wet, soaking wet. So I was like, this is going to
almost like making the ceiling sweat. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So they start calling off names. Right. And they're like, I think there were like 80 numbers. Right. So they start calling off names, and they call off names, and they call off names, and they call off names. The other two cats, they call off their name, like, present or here or whatever the fuck. And then they got to the end, and they're like, anybody name they didn't call. And I was like, you didn't call me. And I was like, this is not going to be good.
Special.
And I said, and they were like, well, get the fuck out of here then. And I was like, there was like this cloud behind me, and I was gone. So I got back, and I don't remember how exactly it happened, but company commander was like, what the fuck you doing back here? And I told him, and he said, Merry Christmas, Dinardo. Merry Christmas. Right? You know what I mean? So clearly I was making a positive impression, right. You know what I mean? I was giving extra of myself, painting you know what I mean? Like you know what I mean? I was having a positive impact, and it might have made its way to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kept me a little
that
slack.
That kept you from some static.
Yeah, right. Because, them other cats came back, and they got the beat down. They were hurt. They were hurt for days. You know what I'm saying? They were not good. So, but that was, that was basic.
So I actually did the make a sailor hurt thing, right? So my story is a little bit different. I had made it through, I think our boot camp was like 8 weeks, if I remember correctly, something like that.
Right.
So I had made it through like 3/4 of it not being noticed, right?
Oh, yeah, that's not good, because then when they finally do notice you. Yeah.
Right. So, but one of my buddies, a friend of mine from O'Fallon, was a Navy recruiter. He wasn't my recruiter, but he was a recruiter. So when my buddy Smitty figured out that I had joined the Navy, he brought Steve over to give me some insight. Steve was actually the one that told me, it's an 8-year hitch You can do it a couple different ways. You can go 2 active, 6 reserve, 4 active, 4 reserve. You know, that's whole thing they didn't tell you. So I had already known and done the 4 and 4. But one of the things he told me was like, attention to detail, don't get noticed. Right? So be cool, do everything you're supposed to do, stay out of the spotlight.
Right.
So at that, 5-week mark or 6-week mark or whatever it was, my company commander, the head guy, was a CB.
Right.
So he's a little crazy.
Right.
And I can't remember what the other guy was, but he was kind of the calmer one out of the 2 of them. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Senior Chief Zelinsky was the CB. So he walks up to me, man, and doing that thing like the Marines you were talking about. I mean, he was like right in my face, just screaming at me. He's like, who are you? What are you doing here? And I was like, sir, I've been here the whole time. Remember when you mashed him for getting his hair cut? Remember when you did that to this guy? Remember this? Remember that? I said, I've been here the whole time. You were basically
pointing out that you were the cat that didn't get mashed.
Yep. And he was like, guess what?
It's your turn.
Your turn.
Yeah, that was not good.
Yeah. So fortunately for me, though, I had just come out of football, right? I mean, I went to school on a football scholarship and basically wasted that partying. And so when I went to boot camp, I was still pretty much in shape from football.
Right.
So, I mean, again, only so many push-ups you can do. It's physically impossible at some point. You get to, failure.
Right.
Only so many sit-ups you can do. Only so many jump, there's only so much you can do. I just gave it everything I had. Right. And when I cashed out, I cashed out. He was like, you got to give me another one. You got to do another one.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't have nothing left. So I made it through that without a whole lot of static, and then went back to the compartment with everybody. And Senior Chief was like, what'd you think of that? And I said, well, it's basically a football practice, sir.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a little disappointed in that because he thought he had me, you know what I mean? But I was like, again, I'm already kind of in shape.
Right.
Because I already been doing some of this stuff before I even came here, you know what I mean? So it wasn't too painful for me to go through that. But it was that, what are you doing here? I've been here the whole time. Now you're going to go.
Right. Well, the strange thing is that there was pictures of, you have your command picture or whatever, and there's a photograph. And I tried to look through my photograph of everybody in there and finally picked myself out. But when I look at that picture of myself, I was 183. And dude, my jawline looks chiseled out of an anvil, bro.
Right.
I can't even really tell it's me. Like it's that. I'm like, dude, if I ever get down to like 185, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to look nuts.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that whole, it's amazing how much just eating and marching and working out, eating and marching and working out changes your whole, without any other, Dean's over here shaking his head, without any other, negative influences for. Well, I thought it was longer. I thought it was like 12 or 13 weeks we were in basic.
Man, I thought we were only there for like 8, dude, because the Marines were longer. Now, everybody was longer than us, I think. Right, so I thought we were only in there for like 2 months, but I could be wrong.
I wonder. So.
It seemed like a long time, regardless of whether it was 2 months or not.
Yeah.
Right, and so let me give you another insight. I don't know if I ever told you this. I might have. You broke up with your girl before you went in. I got the damn Dear John letter.
Did you get a Dear John letter?
I got the damn Dear John letter, dude. And Senior Chief Zelinsky was like, what's this? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that sucks.
Read that, man. Was like, threw that away. Right. And he's like, you all right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not showing no fear. I'm not showing no emotion in that, John. That ain't the place to do that. You know what I mean? So, man, I struggled with that. That night when I was sleeping, I didn't sleep good that night, dude.
Did you ever communicate with that person afterwards, that girl?
Sean, we probably talked a handful of times after that. But that was pretty much the end of it. I mean, that broke it down. You know what I mean? I was like, you can do that? Right? I mean, we'd been through so much stuff. So we went to school together. Went to Northeast Missouri State together, which I wasn't necessarily a fan of that. But okay, cool, whatever. And then we had come home for either Thanksgiving or Christmas break at one point. And as I was going to pick her up to go back to school, I turned the corner to her mom's house. 100 cop cars, man. She committed suicide. Her mom.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm like, ding, ding, ding. Like, we're supposed to go back to school today. I don't think you're coming, are you? And she was like, no, man, I got to stay here and handle this. So she never came back to school.
All right.
You know what I'm saying? So.
And she probably wasn't emotionally prepared for a relationship when she went into service. There was no way. Right.
Right. But again, same as you, right? Like there was pieces of the puzzle where I was like, if I continue down this path,
right,
this ain't gonna be good.
right.
You know what I'm saying? So I got to go do something else. I got to go figure something out for me so that I can change my trajectory and get to somewhere positive.
Right. Wow. A lot of similarities between you and I.
Exactly.
More than sometimes we even really realize.
Right. Were you with us? Well, because we weren't in class together, so you probably weren't. There was a time we were still in Tennessee, and we were coming from the barracks over to the classroom, right? And I don't know if you remember, our barracks was like you had to cross a fairly main street from our barracks to get over to the classroom. And then there was like a little wooded area that you walk through, and then the classrooms popped out from there. But so your Marine stories, right? The front of our class, as we were marching from the barracks to the classroom, the Marines were always up front because them cats was AJ squared away, right? They marched sweet, right? Everything crisp, everything where it was supposed to be. Navy guys in the back, coking and joking, smoking, BSing around in the back of the formation and shit.
Out of step,
the whole 9 yards. The base commander, Gunny Bonatello, was standing in the woods when we marched by. He jumped out the woods in that Marine stance, you know what I'm saying? It was like,
you guys were smoked.
Oh, you were dead, man. He was like, stop this company, right? And all the Marines were like, dude, you guys don't know what you just did. Man, he read us the riot act for 15 minutes. We were late for class, which caused a whole another, it just snowballed for that whole day. And then somebody recognized I didn't have my UWIC on my sleeve. And he was like, you got 10 minutes to run back to the barracks, get that UWIC on your sleeve, and get back over there. I had to sew it on, man. Like I'm breaking out the sewing, little needle and thread, sewing that thing on there, right? Trying to get it all done and get back. That day was probably one of the worst days in my whole Navy career. I got chewed out by Gunny Bonatello. I got chewed out by the school company commander. I got chewed out by everybody that day.
Yeah.
But I stayed in it because I didn't have nowhere else to go.
I still think to this day one of the best words that we no longer use was hosed.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And I remember like laughing with Brad. Be like, did you see his uniform? He was hosed. And he'd look over at him and it looked like he just dug it out the hamper.
Yep.
And you were like, oh, he's not doing well in this inspection.
Yep.
Like that's not gonna be good. You know what I mean? And then half the time it was Brad that was hosed.
Like you iron that with a rock.
My uniform is hosed.
Right.
And you'd be like, yeah, man, I don't know what's going on with that, man. But you're not faring well for this inspection.
Right.
So, oh man, that's so funny, man.
What else should we do in Tennessee, man?
Oh man. Well,
hold on. We ain't even made Tennessee. We're just coming out of boot camp right now.
Well, I went home for 30 days, right? I met up with my same posse, but now I was a little different.
Right.
I was different.
Right.
Really hot girl that I dated briefly, you know what I mean? Like I went out and had some drinks and, you know what I mean? Like it was basically just 30 days before I reported to Millington.
All right.
So, and then I got there. I reported. They gave me my orders to go to the galley, and that's, within a couple of days, you and I met.
Yep.
So,
I think one of the first times, so we met, you guys were already there. I think I was the last one of the network to show up.
Right.
But there was a couple, I don't think I went out with you guys the first couple nights because I was still kind of new and trying to set it in.
I don't even remember a lot of those first couple nights. Probably because I was inebriated to the nines.
Well, and so that's kind of the story I was headed to because there was one, probably my third, fourth day in the galley, right? Like I came in and it was like the whole crew you guys had been out and was just, you guys must have got destroyed that night, right? Because I was like, looking at you guys like he's hit.
Well, the saving grace for Brad and I was because we worked in the scullery, which was basically the dishwashing unit. Right. Nobody really saw us.
Correct. You could go back there and hurt by yourself.
We had to still bust suds and wash dishes or whatever. And we had already networked ourselves like people would bring us like trays worth of pancakes and bacon, and we'd be in the back eating,
just grubbing,
and just you know what I mean. Like we actually had such a good time back in that damn dishwashing thing. Like we busting suds, you know what I mean. Like it was it's funny how some of the most challenging or what would seem like almost inconsequential times in your life can sometimes be the places where it's the most fun because you really, what responsibility did I have?
Clean
washing these pots and pans and these dishes and run them through the, you know what I mean? Like I'm sure it was drudgery, but we laughed and carried on. And as soon as we got out, we all posseed up and, hit the town. We didn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of cash wise.
Right.
But we learned that neither did anybody else. You know what I mean? Like in the town we were in, they was twice as broke as a joke. So, you know what I mean? Like we talked about it before, like where you learn that you can buy a cigarette at a window.
Well, hold up, man. Back up. You had to go donate some blood to get $20.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right. To be able to spend on them.
That's where you realize that the crack epidemic was not limited to Philadelphia. You know what I'm saying? Like people were definitely getting on in Tennessee too.
Yeah. So for sure, man, for sure.
And in Millington, Tennessee too. So, but luckily enough, at that point I was too fearful to pop
get
positive.
Too crazy.
And,
right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like so. I just basically, switched seats on the Titanic and just, we drank like fish. And don't get me wrong, like I thought about getting high a lot, but, I was just staying clean and, and keeping my nose clean was more important, frankly, than,
I was trying to make something out of that, right? I didn't want to end up back in O'Fallon.
The imagination of being back in where I came from and having people say, oh, well, you almost, but you got kicked out.
Yeah, you failed.
You know what I mean? Like I didn't need that. I had enough.
And I had so there was a guy I went to high school with who had an older brother that was 2 or 3 years older than us. And he actually popped positive for a drug test while he was in the Navy and he came home. So I had a very close, real deal experience with that embarrassment. You know what I'm saying? Or that bad juju.
Shame.
Yeah, whatever.
Shame.
Call it whatever you want.
Shame.
It ain't good.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're in Tennessee, right? We've made it past the what was it? Mess cranking. Right. Now we're really posseed up. There's 10 of us, as you indicated yesterday, about 10 of us, right? From all over the country.
Something like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like we were at
Kern, Goforth, right? You know me, you, Jared, Blair.
I don't even remember what Stretch's name was. I just remember.
I can't think of it either.
Yeah, because he was like 6'8".
Yeah, he was like tall. So that was the dude I had the fake phone with. You mentioned fake phone. Well, real phone not activated, right? One of them satchel phones. Stretch did that, right? He went and got the phone because I had the Mustang, right? And so we kind of played that game a little bit like we was somebody.
When did you have the Mustang? Because I don't remember. Because by the time you and I were kicking it, we were leasing the J2K off of.
Well, so now that you said that, the Mustang came when we actually got permanent orders because we were all West Coast. Remember,
so that was at the very,
went West Coast because me, Brad, and Stretch were all out there, and Blair was out there too. You just came late because you were in AFTA.
Oh, wait a minute. What was it? Was it Blair's truck that you slammed my door in? My hand in the door? What was that?
Might have been. It was either that or the J2K.
Yeah,
no, it might have been the wedge,
man. It was Blair's truck because we were sitting next to each other, jammed in that bad boy, and I had my hand in the thing like this, and you were, two of us jammed in one seat, with two big dudes like us jammed in one seat, and you're like, oh, boom! You reach across and pull the door closed, and my hand disappeared in the door, and I was like,
I think I rolled your hand.
You were like, your hands are soft. I was like, yo, put your hand in this door and let's slam this bad boy in there. You know what I mean?
I think I got you with the window once too. Though.
I don't know, man.
Yeah, I did because you had your fingers out the window.
Calling the cat soft for damaging my. You know what I mean? I don't know how my hand wasn't broken from that, man. That shit was not good. So, but all right, so. We covered yesterday some of the conversation about how we got orders, and then you went to San Diego, and then I went to San Diego right after your words, and then you went to Florida.
Correct.
And I
you cruised West Coast, didn't you?
I cruised West Coast. So I reported to Helicopter Squadron 6. So the Screaming Indians, right?
Was that North Island or was that?
Yeah, North Island, right? So we were in those big giant dirigible hangars, those big Mickey D's giant, right? So we were up
40
in
was down there with you guys. HSO 40, the training squadron for me.
So And when I got there, I was there for like 2 weeks because I arrived and the rest of the squadron wasn't there yet. They were coming in off deployment. So it was like a week or two where it was like maybe 30 of us. You know what I mean?
And then first lieutenant?
Yeah, I was first Louis. Like
Buffer tech?
Yeah, you know what? Like cleaning and, you know what I mean? Like it was really skate for a couple weeks. It was kind of like cool. And then everybody came back. And so they had gone on the... So they were coming back in 93. So I'm trying to think whether they had done the Cherry Cruise. I'm not sure if they'd come back from the Cherry Cruise. They did Cherry Cruise on the Lincoln. So Cherry Cruise meaning, you know, the inaugural cruise for the Abe. And all I remember is those cats came back and they had a level, they were a family. Like they had a level of camaraderie and they were clowning each other and they were fleet sailors.
Correct.
And I still was not. Like I was still a, you know what I mean? Like I was a fresh out of boot. But I never went to the line shack. They never sent me to line. They kept me in the shop. Instead, eventually I got sent to corrosion control and I was scrubbing rust off the aircrafts. But I just remember my first impression being like, you know, those guys just fucking just laughing and clowning each other and playing practical jokes. And oh my God, they were so, it was like when I really learned it, you know, it was the first place that I learned that, you know what I mean? Like the way that you deal with, fear and worry and all these other things was to, you know, is laughter. And they played practical jokes on me. I remember they stole my jumpsuit. I had my, you know, I had like a, you know, blue zip up, you know, work, you know, thing. And they stole it out of the thing. And they took
dark blue coveralls.
Dark blue coveralls. And they took them down to the parachute rigger shop. Now, parachute rigger in helicopter squadron don't be doing no parachutes, clearly. Right. So, you know, but they, you know, they set up all the guys' equipment and all the rescue, you know, the guys who were the SAR guys or whatever. And the dude that we had in there was like a banging on a sewing machine. So, you know, I went to get on so each day I put on my blue coveralls and it's just getting a little tighter, a little tighter. The whole time I was like, man, I must be gaining a lot of weight. And here what they were doing was every day they would take it down and he would sew another like inch out of it, another inch out of it. You know what I mean? Until one day I went to put it on and I was like,
get it.
My arms were like this. And I was like, what the hell? And then I flip it inside out and realize you could see all the lines where they just kept sewing it a little bit tighter. Yeah. Like, man, these guys are nuts.
That was kind of your indoctrination to the network a little bit.
Yeah, it was one. You know what I mean? Like before they were there for probably 3 or 4 months until we started working up again.
Yep.
Right. So it wasn't very long until, you know, we're going back out on the Abe again. You know what I mean? And now I'm going.
Correct.
So I remember a couple things. I remember realizing that the impact of a deployment on the guys who go. So I remember I'm in the locker room getting ready to throw my corrosion greens on because at that point I got sent to the next shop over. Right. I'm working in airframes.
With your wire brush.
These two cats come in, one guy named Tucci, one guy named Felitsky. And I'll never forget because they're in the locker room and I could see the mirror, the one locker or whatever, and I hear them. And then I hear Felitsky, let me get in on that. And I'm like, what's up? And they're like, you know, what's going on? They were like, you know, Meth, you want to snort? And I was like, to go work on the aircraft? And he was like, yeah. And I was like,
I don't know if I need that.
I don't think I can. It sounds good in theory, but if a bird hits the drink and everybody gets piss tested, they find out that you've been on speed. I think they're going to roast your nuts over an open flame. I don't think I'm down for that. Well, I come to find out that one or the other of them, I think it was Tucci, he came back from deployment, and just a couple weeks before he got back from deployment, he was like, his bank account was empty. And it was like his old lady was staying back on the beach. Yep. And he got back and he had his keys and He went to his apartment, and his key wasn't working in the door of his apartment, and the door opened up. It was this big brother, big dude. He said, looked at him. He was like, "What the fuck you doing in here? Where's my wife at?" or whatever. And he was like, "I don't know what you're talking about, dude. I got this lease like 3 months ago."
Yeah, man.
She cleaned him out.
Cleaned
She
him
wasn't
out,
even
vanished.
there.
Vanished.
So now
That's
I
a
know.
fairly common story.
Now I know why
Yeah.
he was getting on, right? You know what I mean? Like the impact of, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we started getting on the ship, and and we had like a long list of quals you had to get signed off,
Correct.
Safety quals and that type of thing. So,
LSC, LSO.
so right. So we went up, and it was funny because we would go up and work on the flight deck, and we were on the Abraham Lincoln. And I was a, aviation electronics technician. So I was a troubleshooter. And, and he might even watch this at some point. He watches my shit. So guy by the name of John Bowles. John, loved John. He was badass. And John was the first class, and he was in charge of the shop. So I took a liking to John, and John took a liking to me. He was cool. He was crazy as the loon, but he was fun too. And he was like, there was a cat in the squadron that, Joey DeCunzo, Joe Bag of Donuts.
Joey Bag of Donuts.
Joey Bag of Donuts was this little kind of dumpy kid. He was a sweetheart, though. I was fond of Joe. You know what I mean? Like Joe had, taken on a bit of a religious fervor, and, but he was kind of always hosed, and you know what I mean? But they sent us up on the flight deck, and Joe was like my sign to get on my flight deck quals checked off. So
is this the cat that you did your first lap across the flight deck with?
Yeah.
Oh man, tell that story, because I love that story, dude.
Well, at first, we get there, and so we would pull out, and it would be like we would be landing and recovering aircraft on the flight deck, but there would be no other aircraft there. You know what I mean? Like we didn't leave with all
the whole complement.
Yeah, no, it was just us.
Right.
We were the first one on and the last one's off at all times. So I'd worked up there with him, and you know what I mean? And he'd try to explain to me, like, don't go here, don't go there. Here's where you die. Here's where you die. Here's where you don't want to stand. Here's where you don't want to. I learned from a guy who'd been on several deployments working on a flight deck, and he was a flight deck rat, and I was a new guy. So John told me, if you're going to go with this guy, you know what I mean? Like, you just hold on to the back of his float coat, and wherever he goes, you just hang on and you just go there. So they came in for the first like real flight operations, and next thing you know, we're catching 14s, we're catching 18s, EA6Bs, A6s, we're catching
everybody's coming.
Right. E2C Hawkeyes, they're all coming in, right?
Everybody's got to come home.
And so we go up on a flight deck and shit, and he's like, and he's like, he's got his goggles on, he's like, just hang on to me, full blast, and he comes sprinting across the flight deck and shit. Well, there's an F-18 like taxiing. And he and I'm hanging on. I'm like, I'm not going to let go of this dude because we're in danger zone, right? You know what I mean? And he goes underneath the aircraft while she's taxiing. So we run up under it. And I'm like, I don't know. I just hang on for dear life. So there's a space that's safe where you can go behind the landing gear and before the hook, right? You don't want to go under the hook, because if the hook drops, that should kill you for sure. Right, because it weighs hundreds of pounds and it's steel, right? So, but first, it was kind of like a way to get me to pucker.
Yeah,
you know what I mean,
100%.
for real. I come down off the flight deck though, like that was cool.
Adrenaline junkie.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that was
yeah.
totally cool. And from that point forward, I was about being on the flight deck.
Correct.
All the time.
Me too.
Right? All the time. And it was like a giant air show. Like it was always like, so, but the one thing that I really, aside from troubleshooting helicopters, which I like to do, but a lot of times that was monotonous because you're standing around waiting for shit to break. And off flight operations, you're always maintaining stuff. So you're running, 714, 2856 day inspections, et cetera. You know what I mean? Like all that stuff. But when flight operations hit, you know what I mean? Be up on the deck was cool, except sometimes it was monotonous. But for us, the difference between us and you guys is when we ran mode 4 chucker, we ran mode 4 chucker for the entire air wing.
Yeah.
So So I went up a couple times, and you know what I mean. I went up with somebody else. Now, mode 4 is, you know, for people that don't know, is
Identify friend or foe.
Yeah, identification friend or foe. So what it is you know, aircraft shoot a secret code that other aircraft receive, and it's how they identify whether or not it's a friendly or whether or not you get shot down. So it's a serious thing. And ATs, for us, it was one of the systems that we were in charge of. So it was the reason why we had security clearances while we were in, was because of handling the codes. And the codes were distributed to NATO. Yep. So not only us, we got the same codes, but also all the NATO countries got those same codes, so that they squawked that code.
That
so
stupid
that we,
little black
that
thing
little
that had
black
all the
box, all the pins in it, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you had to run around and code all the aircraft, all our aircraft. Well, what they would do is once every, it depended on how many squadrons we had, but you know, they would assign 2 squadrons at a time, and they would rotate us through, and you would get, you know, basically you'd mode 4 duty, which meant I had to go up to the tower, CIC, and sit and, you know, and flight operations, and then go out and basically with this thing they call mode 4 checker, which was like this box that had an antenna on the top with like some goggles on the front, and it was big and battery powered, and you would go up and you would run from aircraft to aircraft, and you know, you would talk to the plane captain and communicate back and forth with the pilot while he was in the cockpit, and shoot their antennas at different places to see if basically your box is pretending it's an aircraft.
Correct.
Right, is shooting that code back and forth. And so, you know, but the cool thing was, you know, now you're VF-213 Black Lions, you know, that 14 squadron, I'm communicating with the pilots, or, you know, you know.
There's something about what we did that somehow gave us some extra props because of, you know, some of that mode 4 stuff and some of the clearances that we had. It almost gave us like direct access to have different conversations with people.
It was the thing about it that I liked was that for a brief, and it sucked. Shooting mode 4 sucked, but
I guess so. On a whole wing, I had 2 birds.
Yeah. Well, so like I remember, okay, so here's a good example. I remember for the F-14s. So the F-14s would be back, so behind the island, on the same side as the island. They would park 3 or 4 of them, and the tail of the aircraft would hang over the ocean.
Right.
So, you know, the 2 fins underneath the engines were where the mode 4 antennas were that you needed to shoot. You needed to hit them from an angle a little bit. So you'd have to go underneath the F-14 while she was turning. Right. So you got these giant engines above you, like, you can't hear, so your teeth are rattling, and you'd have to like jam your foot. There was I don't know what they call it. It was like a coping or a molding or whatever, like a steel.
Almost a nosing.
Something like that ran along the edge of the ship, and it was just about tall enough that you could jam your boot underneath of it. So I would literally like jam my boot underneath of it because I would have had to hang over the ocean, right? And then like get an angle on it and shoot, right? To see if I could get my lights that told me whether or not, you know what I mean? And there was once or twice that I downed an aircraft where, you know, and then once or twice that, you know, hotshot fighter jock got mad at me because I told him his shit wasn't working. Right. But, you know, that, you know, it was very dangerous, you know what I mean? Because, you know, you had the level of awareness you had to have when you were doing that was like next level, because now you're not just, you know, on spot waiting to catch a helicopter. You're, you know what I mean? Like you're messing with.
You're in it now, man.
And you're with all these different airframes, which each one of them has its own things you have to, like an A6 with the, you know, because suck you in the engine, and you know what I mean.
We
like,
all saw that video in boot camp.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, and that's how you know, that's I run mode 4, you know what I mean, and you know, troubleshot helicopters, and you know, and did 2 tours, so 2 full West packs.
You're always Abe Lincoln.
2 full tours on the Abraham Lincoln, 93 and 95. I did a Westpac, and then I did the Abraham Lincoln went in for, you know,
slap or something.
Yeah, refit, whatever, and we got transferred. I was on with Carrier Air Wing 11, so we got Carrier Air Wing 11 transitioned to the Kitty Hawk, and I was short. I only had like 6 months left, and we did a shorty, like 30 days. We went out to Hawaii and back, and that was the last So I got to see what it was like to be on the Abraham Lincoln, and then I saw what it was like to be on the
Shitty Kitty.
on the Shitty Kitty. Stinking Lincoln versus Shitty Kitty. I got to go from one to the other, and I learned some things. I learned that if you go to war, you want to be on the Lincoln.
Oh, it was a newer boat.
Right. You know what I mean? Like she was bristling.
Mm-hmm.
Like she was ret for it.
Mm-hmm.
And if I wanted to be in peacetime, I wanted to be on the Kitty. Because the Kitty was older and they had their shit together. The food was better. It was a little bit smaller. They were a little bit more laid back.
Right.
It was like, the Kitty Hawk was just like, if you were going to be at peacetime, probably want to be on the Kitty Hawk. If you were going to go to war, I want to be on my bed. I want to be on
the Abe because it's got all the latest and greatest on it.
She's, you know what I mean? Like we're ready for war.
Right, technologically advantaged.
But in '93, we were in Hong Kong, Singapore, United Arab Emirates 7 times, Dubai. And then we were ready carrier. So, which means that you're basically on the hot seat connected to the president's phone. Yep. And when they dragged those Marines through in Mogadishu, we were in the Persian Gulf. And I'll stand on the flight deck after 29 days at sea. They had this thing where they pulled in before the 30th day because once the 30th day hit, you got extra pay in your check. So the way they kept it so that you didn't get the extra pay in your check was they pulled into Jab Ali in Dubai on the 30th day, just outside of Dubai on the 30th day and ported. So it was like a way to keep you from getting that extra money, right?
Yeah.
So
that was a carrier problem because on the small boys we didn't do
just
that.
Pulling everywhere.
We stayed out, and we also hey, this parallel on this side of it, you get your hazardous duty pay. So we'd slip across the line, get that hazardous duty pay, slip back across the line, right? Because on a frigate, we're so small.
Yeah, they're probably not worried about that money.
Nobody's worried about a frigate. You know what I'm saying? So there's some advantages to that.
So we were in the Gulf, 29 days at sea. I'm ready to go get you good?
Yeah, I'm good. It's just I rolled over it on the chair. Keep going.
Yeah. We're at 29 days. I worked night shift, so I worked.
Actually, like that. I was 7 at night to 7 in the morning.
Yeah, but on the flight deck at night in the Persian Gulf, you know what I mean? It's next level dangerous times 10 because you can't really see, you know what I mean? But I switched over to the morning and I woke up on the flight deck and all the aircraft had already flown off, so there was really the only thing really left was our birds. Right. So, and I got a little hook there for your wires or somewhere. With the chair and I don't want to unplug it. So you were like, there we go. Nah, we're good. So I'm standing on the flight deck and I'm waiting for us to pull in, and I could see, land way off in the distance, and then all of a sudden the ship heel over and start hauling ass in the wrong direction. And I'm like, wait a minute, beer's that way. What are you doing? And that was when we found out.
Oh, you got activated.
Yeah, captain named R.J. Nyby, commanding officer of the carrier, came over the 1MC over the loudspeaker and said, told us what we were doing, and we were headed for Africa. And we classified speeds.
Yeah.
So fast, in fact, that the 100 foot of freeboard, right? You know what I mean? So there's 100 foot off the flight deck, 100 foot to the water line. So
3 screams.
Yeah, you know what I mean? You got a long time to hit, you know what I mean? You write your will, tie your shoes,
exactly.
Think about how you're going to hit.
Right.
As a friend of mine said one time, and all that, he got blown off the flight deck one time, and he said, you hit the water. He said, knocked the wind out of me. He says, when I came to, he said, the first thing I thought, his brother was an AO1. He said, first thing I thought was shark.
I would have been mine too.
He said, and all that machismo shit was out the water. He said, I screamed and cried like a baby. He said, no problem flying over to scoop me up with the bird. He said, I was in the water screaming.
Right, come get me.
Scared to death.
Right.
So, so it's 100 foot of freeboard, right? They ran multi-point, what they call chocks and chains. So they locked all the aircraft down. They literally buckled everything down to the pad eyes on the ship so it couldn't speed around, so they could fly.
Yep.
And they were going so fast that if you went down on the fantail, there was only 30 feet between the fantail and the wake. So you had 70 foot of wake behind you, flying.
Right.
And everything over, I think, 25 or 30 knots on the plat on the camera that told you how fast you were going was blocked out because it was classified.
Correct.
So we were moving at speedboat speeds,
Yep.
right, in a ship with 5,000 people on it.
Most people don't know, but I think the carrier is probably the fastest ship in the fleet.
Yeah, she ain't playing.
Right.
She
She got to go.
Matter of fact, she can create so much torque that she can flatten her screws.
Yep.
Right? You know what I mean? And I've heard of at least one commanding officer that lost his command because he
did that.
He did that. He told them to go too hard, and they literally had to pull those multi-million-dollar house-size screws off the back of the ship.
I think you got 4 too, don't you?
What? Yeah, I believe so. So a lot of horsepower.
Correct.
So so we pulled up off the coast of Mogadishu, and they talked about when we were on our way that they might port in they might port in Mombasa, Kenya, but at that time the AIDS rate was so high, and they were fearful that if a bunch of guys got off the ship all horny and ready to go,
All Navy.
that they would come back with a lot more than they expected. So
Major problem.
so we sat off the coast of we provided air support for that was other Operation Restore Hope, and we saved some Marines. You know what I mean? Because air support, they desperately needed air support. And it was surprising how, in fact, there's a whole story behind that I can tell at some point about, how I felt like I had like a minor contribution there, or, had a contribution there that made, probably the contribution. But then basically the Somalis, put down their weapons when we started breaking the sound barrier over Mogadishu, and to hear that sound, hear that ba-boom, you know what I mean, off in the distance, we're like, oh, the game has changed. We're here now.
Yeah, you bring some Tomcats and bring the boys over and stuff.
Yeah, it was like there was a whole different matter, and
Correct.
they suddenly had changed their tone.
Right.
So, so we were, and then we went for Perth. We were 9 days in Perth. But we never ported off Africa. So we went from, 29 days before we were about to pull in, then turned around and headed for Mogadishu. And then Mogadishu for a couple weeks, and then headed for Perth. So we did 67 days straight on the ship. At sea. So at 45 on the sea counter, I had a beer day, and they broke out all the, Foster's Lager, but all the beer that we had formaldehyde in it. So the guys, weren't supposed to, but a lot of guys traded beer for beer. So you'd have some guys who didn't even want any beer, and other guys who had half a dozen of them that were blasted. Right. But, because after not drinking for that long, you know what I mean? And,
couple
clean
beers
living, a couple beers knock in. So, but we ported in Perth for 9 days. And, for, debauchery like has never been seen. and then back to San Diego. That was 1993. And then 1995, we did Hong Kong, and then straight into the Gulf. And then Dubai. So, on the way back both times. No, on the Lincoln both times. Right. But on the way back both times, we hit Hawaii. So, Port and Pearl was pretty cool. You know what I mean? Like I remember standing on the flight deck and riding the boards.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean. So I get my dress whites, and I'm standing on the side of the ship. You know what I mean? Like because I got assigned. Mm-hmm. And happened to be on the side when we pull in the Pearl, and they unloaded 1.5 million pounds of ordnance and 1.5 million gallons of fuel to raise the hull high enough so that we could pull into Perth, so we could pull into Pearl. So literally the offload took days nonstop, and then I got to ride stand on the edge of the ship and parade rest while we rode across Pearl, and I got to see the Arizona under the water, and there's nothing like seeing a warship under the water when you're on a warship.
Right.
I cried like a baby, and I looked next to me, and a lot of other cats were too, and that's a different level of rite of passage for a sailor
Yep.
to, to pass by your brother and, who died many years before in sacrifice.
Yeah.
And, I became a different sailor that day. You know what I mean? Like, it changed me.
I didn't get a chance to do that while I was in, but Lucinda and I went to Hawaii because her sister had a, business meeting or something that they were doing in Hawaii. So we went out there, dude. And that was, that was tough, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was tough.
Yeah. Intense.
And still, dripping fuel now.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. They're all gone,
Ooh,
I think, now.
Shit, dude.
Yeah, they're all gone, I think, now.
Yeah. All the dudes?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
off the
think they're
boat.
I think they're all gone now. Matter of fact,
Correct.
I was at the PX on base getting some flippers and some goggles because I was going to go do some snorkeling.
Right.
And a couple guys, and my plan was to go to the memorial. And a couple guys caught me and were like, Dino, don't go.
Right.
And I was like, well, what do you mean don't go? And they were like, dude, it's a bunch of Japanese taking pictures. You're going to get salty. They were like, we almost couldn't
Couldn't stand it.
Right.
Right.
And I didn't. So I've never been to the memorial. So.
Well, I never been to the memorial because when we went, it was closed.
Right.
But we did take the ride on the boat and went past,
yeah.
all of those sites, man. And it was just like, dude.
Intense.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's us.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That's when you realize that, all gave some gave all.
Correct.
A lot of those guys were, on the fantail for Sunday memorial
Chilling.
service,
Yeah.
right? You know what I mean? Like they were, they were doing church services or, you know what I mean? Like grabbing a bite to eat or whatever, They didn't know what was coming. And the next thing you know, they were full on war mode. So,
Correct.
but,
disadvantage too.
but that's, I had the, probably between that and the flight deck crash were the two things that changed me most.
The flight deck crash. Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember you telling me that story too.
Yeah, that was.
Was that the first female pilot?
Well, so.
Can't remember exactly.
Okay,
where
so
she
I'll tell in the honor of everybody who, and I may botch the names, but I'll do my best, and and also in the interest of distance and time, the complete accuracy of what I say may be
Ever so slightly off.
may be skewed, but I'll do the best I can. So, we were the first aircraft carrier to bring women on the ship. So we were the first integrated aircraft carrier, which meant that, a lot had to be done to reconfigure the ship to handle male and female cohabitating on the ship at the same time. Meant that,
Yep.
Berthing spaces and hallways, and because you couldn't be there, with in your drawers while some pilot was on her way to a ship, so on her way to birds, so they had to create extra walls and compartments and all this other stuff. So it took some time. And so in 1990, I want to say maybe, I can't remember what year it was. The first thing I saw that really caught me off was we had a pilot. She was the first F-14 Tomcat pilot. Her call sign was Revlon. And she, I think, as I recall, I was not physically on the roof when it happened. I was watching
on the flight deck.
I was on the plat. I was watching on the plat. I was in the shop. We had a 27-inch TV with a tube TV down there or whatever. And when flight operations were on, all shops had to have the plat on. So the platform's a series of it was over 30 cameras, I believe, from all different angles of the ship, some from up high, some from literally built into the deck to film from all different angles. So when aircraft are being recovered or pilots are coming in to land, you can see, the aircraft as it comes in. And I just happened to be looking at the plat for some odd reason. There was a lot of, I'll say it, there was probably a lot of, not probably, there was certainly a lot of hope tied to for a lot of females.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Being the first, Kara Holtgren was her name.
Yeah,
And she came in and they said, power, power. And she rolled off to one side and there was this big splash. And I was like, fuck does that mean? I remember thinking to myself,
now what?
And they were like, oh, she's gone. And I was like, what do you mean gone? They were like, yeah, she's gone. And I was like, that girl just died. And they were like, yeah. And I was like, this ain't no bullshit.
Right.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, that's like, you know, because it was so shocking and matter of fact all at the same time. Right? You know what I mean? Like, because in some ways, like a lot of other things that you see are more like, you know, I'm sure, and I can't speak for people who have been in, you know, physical combat in the way that, you know, some other services do, but, you know, you can't make light of the fact that, you know, people, you know, sacrifice their lives. And, you know what I mean? And that was just so, just
surreal.
Yeah, it was just like, wait a minute, like, she's gone?
Yeah.
Right? And I didn't know her. I could have ran into her out in town. I wouldn't have known her from, you know.
Yeah, but still the camaraderie of the squadron or
yeah,
the
it's
boat,
just like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, damn.
Like, this
know
is
what I
our
mean? Like,
5,000
That was
homies.
hardcore.
Yeah.
And, you know, so that was, you know, rest in peace, Revlon. So then in 1993, we were in the Indian Ocean.
The I.O.
Yeah, we were in the Indian Ocean, and we were steaming towards the Gulf. And what we would do is, in order for all the pilots to maintain proficiency, we would do flight operations. It wasn't like we steamed to a place and then we steamed out. Like, we were constantly, like, taking off and landing aircraft and taking off and landing aircraft so all the pilots can maintain proficiency. They get a certain amount of, like, you know, takeoffs and landings and traps and all that other stuff. So, I worked nights on the flight deck. So, I was in the shop. I was early. I was ahead of schedule, right? And I got yelled at all the time for it too, because because I like being on the roof, and I like being on the roof ahead of time. Right. And they were like, "Don't be on the roof unless you need to be on the roof."
Correct.
But for me, I always went up before I needed to be on the roof, because I like to watch the end of flight operations before we caught helos or before helos took off. I wanted to be there with all the aircraft.
Correct.
Right. So
that was our Top Gun-ness.
Yes, exactly. That was as close as I was ever getting. Right. So I went up, I inventoried tools. You know, we were supposed to catch aircraft. I don't remember exactly what time it was, but it was dark. And I went and I inventoried tools. And I put my tool pouch on and my cranial and my float coat and all my stuff. And I went up on a flight deck, and I literally, like, you came out of the shop and you went out the stairwell and you step up, and then you step up another layer, and you know, and then you just step on the flight deck. So you're basically, like, when you're in the catwalk, you're standing looking at the flight deck at chest level, like everything.
Right, your head's up. Your head's up above.
That's it, right? So, and I stepped up, and I put my foot on the flight deck, and I heard, boom! And I went, what? Right? And I saw this, like, yellow-white flash go, whoa, like this across, and I was like, what the hell was that? Fuck? And then I heard the aircraft siren, the collision alarm go, aircraft siren. And I was just like there was this immediate, like, how, you know, like all that shit we do in basic training when you do firefighting training or whatever. It was just like almost instantly I was like back in the catwalk again, firing up a AFFF hose, you know what I mean? Like, and a bunch of motherfuckers like around me all of a sudden. I was like, whoa, like this is, you know, it was intense.
Yeah.
And because I jumped back down in the catwalk and I looked, you could see from the whole landing area, from the front to the back, the whole aircraft carrier was on fire, the whole thing. So I start peeling out a hose reel, and somebody else right behind me starts peeling out a hose reel too. And we're like, ugh. And I'm up on the flight deck, and immediately, like, I'm fighting a fucking fire. And you can't really see because my eyes are stinging because the JP5, like the jet fuel is, like, you know, burning. And, you know, and I'm like trying to make out what the fuck I see. And there's an engine sitting on the fucking flight deck. Big as this room, a gigantic engine. And I'm just like,
that ain't supposed to be here.
You don't have time to really think. You know what I mean? You're just trying to put out a fire. So, and since I'm one of the first guys in it, right? Like, the way they do it is, like, I'm on the hose, and then there's somebody behind me, right? And then there's somebody behind him, and then there's somebody in the back. And the fourth guy is like this. He's turned the other direction, and he's faking down hose. So if we go forward, he pulls all the hose out just to keep us. And then if we got to go backwards because it gets too hot, he lays the hose back and forth in like an S pattern so that it doesn't get tangled. So if we got to go forward again, we're not stuck.
Right. So he's managing your hose.
So meanwhile, now you get some more senior guys get out there. There's guys out there in khakis, whatever. They're running out. It's pandemonium. So one of the, I guess a chief or whatever, and he comes over and he taps me on the shoulder. Right, which means that the guy behind me relieves me. So that because you have all that pressure coming out of the hose, the guy behind you like literally takes the hose and slides up into the hose, so he never lets tension off that hose, so it doesn't
flop around
and
kill a couple people.
So he slides forward and I run back, and my job is to run back to the back and become the guy that fakes down hose. Right. Well, meanwhile, it's so hot, we're all backing down. So I'm immediately starting to fake hose. And now we're back almost towards the elevator. And I see this cat going like this. He's falling, right? He's only a couple feet from me. And I drop the hose I'm faking and I snatch him by his fucking float coat. And I chuck this dude like Hulkamania, dude. Like I don't know where that energy came from. And he went flying and he kind of like landed halfway, like not on his side, but like partially. And he popped up and his goggles was all crooked. And he looked at me and he was like, ugh, you know what I mean? And then he ran. I realized like that dude would have went over the side. Yeah. So I go back to faking the hose and somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, stretcher crew. And I was like, well, the stretchers, they're all over the ship, but there's a set of stretchers on the back between the 7 and 2 on the back of the island next to the bomb farm. So, which is a nice name for a place where you keep a lot of bombs, right? And missiles. So I run back to the bomb farm, right? And I'm pulling off one of there's a couple of us. We're pulling off one of the stretchers, and there was a couple guys that got there just before us that were pulling off another set of stretchers. So right in front of us. So they went running with one set while we were pulling that second set down, and we went running by with the other set. So we got up to the place where, so you have one guy on each arm of the stretcher, 4 of them, and kneel formation, like you'd kneel and wait for somebody to call you, tell you where to go scoop somebody up. Notice that the other stretchers that went before us weren't there when we went and kneeled down. They were already forward. In. Right. And they came by with the pilot. And he was mangled. He was bad. So the story is that they were coming in to land, and the LSO on the platform, I guess he's the LSO, I think that's what they call him. It's been a long, long time. He's guiding the guy in, and he's saying, power, power, power. And if the aircraft carrier is like this, there's the back end of the ship. There's a spot called the round down, and the round down has a tilt on a 45-degree angle, about that, and it's very thick steel plate. So what it's meant to do is the aircraft, if they're a little teeny bit low, will skip up on. Well, he came from basically the engines down, hit the round down.
Oh, shit.
And he was rolling when he hit it. So as he came in from the back and he was rolling, they popped out, right? So, now F-14 looks like explosive ejection cartridges in the seats. They look like shotgun shells, kind of, sort of.
All right.
And, they have the yellow hoops, the yellow and red hoops behind them. So the Rio, the guy in the back seat, they punch, but the way it happens is when one of them punches or the other one punches, it's in sequence. They don't happen exactly at the same time. It's like boom, boom. Yep. So the Rio punched out, and they're tilted like this. So they don't run into each other in the midair, right? So the Rio's ejection seat actually is meant to eject them backward. This is what I understand. I don't know if this is as far as I know. The Rio punched out backwards. And he landed, I think he broke his leg, or, he got pretty mangled up. But we flew over one of the helos and we scooped him up. Thank you to our SAR guys. The pilot flew forward and still in his ejection seat when he hit the tail of an S-3. up on the fantail. So he was still in the seat when he hit that tail. So, flying at 150, 200. Right. So when they came by to get him, when they went by with him, he was,
tore up.
Yeah, he was in bad shape. Yeah. And he died on the operating table. But so, to me, it was like you go back to the crazy thing about flight operations, and it's probably the same way with combat operations, is you lose somebody, but you have to get back to business.
Correct.
There were aircraft in the air, and we had to recover all those aircraft. And we didn't recover all those aircraft, there were going to be more people dying.
Correct.
So literally, they had to come out with the crane, push that that engine off into the water. You know what I mean? It was just... Meanwhile, the guys in the AO shop that were on the other side, they were on the port side. They said all of a sudden their shop got really hot because they were just one floor below the flight deck like we were. And they were like, they were under the fire right? So they were like, holy shit, the shop got really hot. And they went out and he tried to open up the door to the catwalk, and there was pieces of a missile sitting in the catwalk right in front of him.
Ooh.
They were the ordnance guys, so they knew that was the ordnance shop, right? They were like, "Oh shit!" Right? So they weren't, and if they would have popped their head up, they would have been like in the middle of the in the fire. Right. So, for a long time, you know what I mean? Like, I would wake up, you know what I mean, and hear, like crash sirens. Like I would hear that sound, or
yeah, I'm sure you PTSD
I would wake up in the middle of the, you know what I mean? Like, like, holy shit, like what the, you know what I mean? And, or see, the pilot's face when they went by, just the look on his face, like, right. You know what I mean? Like I'm on my way out. Right. And then just that concept of back to business as usual, because, you know what I mean? Like we got to keep going. And, yeah, rest in peace. Matt Planet Clar. Rest in peace.
Yeah, man.
So, and then about a year later or whatever, I'm working on a flight deck, and F-18 up in up on the fantail, getting ready to launch. And I'm up there just, you get desensitized to how crazy and dangerous or whatever it is, and 100%. And frankly, if you know where the fuck you're going and what you're doing, you're probably going to be okay. There is that point, like Lieutenant Clar saved our lives that day, because if he would have bowled a spare instead of a striker, he would have bowled a gutter ball and right. Went up all those aircraft they were all fueling and they were loading missiles, and
you'd have been forestalled.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, big time.
Major fire big time. Going on your hands.
Yeah, but just the way he hit, perfect strike right down the middle. Yeah. So, and if you look at the video on the plat, he tumbled. The aircraft went like this, and and if you'd like to see it, that video is available on YouTube. So, I'm working on a flight deck, and Lieutenant, I can't think of his first name, last name, I believe was Kirkstetter. His call sign K9. So I'm up by the shop in the catwalk, just kind of like watching them launch aircraft. And they launched this 18, and then he just like disappeared off. Like usually they kind of drop a little bit, and then
you pick it back up.
No, he just and then splash
right in front of you. Well, it's angle deck, so off to the side.
It wasn't. I thought it was a cold cat. They call it cold cat.
Right.
They don't have
That's
enough.
What I thought it was too.
No. So it turned out that there was something wrong with his flight systems, and his, the flight surfaces were incorrect for the launch. So it just basically powered him into the water, and he was gone. Rest in peace, K9. So, I'll never understand what it'll be like for combat veterans to lose people, right? But I do know what it's like to lose people, right? And it changed me.
Yeah,
It changed
too. Yeah, not near as violent as the things that you experienced with the aircraft blowing up and coming up short on the deck. But I mean, we had a guy fall off the fantail on aft watch. He was just gone.
Yeah.
Like we stayed, we pulled the posse together. We had all the frigates and destroyers, right? We're running a pattern. Everybody's got their lights on. Helos flying, running search and recovery. We never found that dude, man.
Well, that's what you realize. Like the dude that I snatched from falling off the side in the middle of you know what I mean? Like just the thought process that, in that pandemonium of what was going on above,
right?
The chances that dude would have been found, or you know what I mean, because you can get hard enough, you can get knocked out, and never inflate
surface.
your flow coat. Your flow coat doesn't inflate, or you know what I mean. God forbid a shark gets you or whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there is no guarantee. Just like you talked about with the dude who fell off the fantail. I always think about, you know what I mean. Like I'm not don't consider myself a lifesaver, so to speak, but that I don't drink beer, I don't drink alcohol, but that cat owes me a soda or something for real. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't even know who he was at this point. Right. You know what I mean? And in the interest of trying to maintain some clarity and distance. You know what I mean? He don't owe me anything.
No, I get it.
You know what I mean? Like I'm just, I just happen to be lucky enough to snatch him by his float coat right at that moment. So, but yeah. So
we did a RAS trap one night, man. We had to do the, hook the whole cable up,
yeah.
and drag it down. Mm-hmm. The AW we had in the back seat that day pulled too much cable on the deck. Right? It was night too. So I'm not the guy doing the hookup. I'm the guy holding the guy doing the hookup. And my only job is to not let go of him like when you did your first lap across the flight deck, right? Your only job was to hold on to that dude's float coat, right? Mm-hmm. So we're doing night ops. It's a little rough. Let's run the whole RAS trap, right? Like let's pull the helicopter down because it's, we're rocking and rolling, doing all this stuff. It'd just be easier. Plus we get a little practice with it. So he hit the thing, threw all the cable down, and it was like cable all over the deck.
Yeah,
right.
It's dangerous as shit.
Right. So we walked out, and Paul and I are both looking at it, and he looked at me, and I'm like, I'm not letting go, bro. I get it. Right. And so he got it hooked up. I'm hanging on the bottom of his float coat.
Right.
He gets it hooked up. He gives him the sign. They start pulling it, and all of a sudden, his leg starts lifting.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm watching this, and I'm like, right now, I'm like, oh, my God.
Yeah, right.
Oh, my God.
Right.
And there's a point in there where I'm like, I might be going with him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And he freaked out and fished hard enough that he got his leg out. And he flopped on the deck, and I just drug his ass in by his float coat. And he was like, dude, thank you so much. Like, you probably saved my life.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
That would not have been good.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty, man. I mean, but like you're saying, there's so much stuff out there that you wouldn't even be thinking of that could be a, major hazard.
Right.
Major hazard, dude. And I don't think we were thinking that when we signed up, right? It was all
no. And I wouldn't trade it for the world, frankly.
Not at
I wouldn't trade. You know what I mean? Like I'm no longer bear the burden of some of the dreams that I had, and I've spent some time addressing some of those things, and I was working for a company. I was in a really bad place. I was, you know what I mean? Like, between companies and all that other stuff. And Memorial Day was coming up, and I decided, I started doing some research about who the pilot was during the crash, and found basically the video from the Platte, and all the stuff like that's readily available, you know what I mean? So here I was basically looking at made it a lot more real, because, you know what I mean? Like, at least in a way, some of that stuff had been lost in time. And here it was, that where I was when it happened, you know what I mean? Like, which one of those dudes on the Platte is me, you know what I mean? The guy's name, all that other stuff. And then found out that, he was a, graduate of Villanova University, which isn't far from where I grew up. that his father and mother, Mr. Clark, give a sword to the senior graduating class in his name every year. And so I found that he had an email address. So I wrote him an email and said, you don't know who I am. And, I'm just a guy that was working on the deck, but I really feel like, your son saved our lives that day because he hit it just right.
He hit it just right.
He hit it just right. It was his last gift.
Right.
And I sent it, and then I didn't think anything of it. I didn't. And then I got a thank you response from him.
That's cool.
And it just meant a lot to me, you know what I mean, just to be able to say that.
Yep. Probably took some weight off your shoulders too.
Maybe not immediately, you know what I mean? Like, if in fact, the strange thing about, however we define post-traumatic stress disorder is that, we re-experience when we unpack.
Correct.
And, I didn't learn that till later when I started doing some therapy at the VA. And they were concerned about, like, how you unpack and what you unpack and when you unpack and whether you're with the right person when you unpack it. So you can unpack it in a way where, it can be dealt with. And, and I was, lucky to be around some professionals that, helped me kind of sort some of those things out a little bit. And, frankly, there are people that have experienced fucking far greater, far more heinous, far more difficult things than I ever did. Yeah. You know what I mean? But, for me to minimize my experience would be to minimize the death of those who gave the ultimate sacrifice. And,
sure.
and I'll never do that.
For sure.
You know what I mean? I'll never do that.
100%.
So let's take a break. Let's have some coffee. And then let's come back for
round 2.
Yeah.
Word.
Cool. Take an intermission for a minute. Just
dude. Get my shit back together.
Back to it. You know what I mean? So
most people don't fully understand I'm the emotional one in the group.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's okay. You know what I mean? Me too. We don't show it as much as we actually are sometimes. And,
emotion gets me fired up. I mean, I live off that. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Well, the funny thing about it is that what I've learned in the recovery process is the strength that comes through vulnerability.
Truth.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, I always thought it was the opposite.
Truth.
You know?
Well, we were taught it was the opposite.
Yes, exactly. You know what I mean? Like, my observation of the strong silent generation and my father, et cetera, you know what I mean, was that, you kept your chin up and you kept it moving. And, and there's truth to that, frankly, as a leader, you know what I mean? If you like, there's a part that, being vulnerable is important. And then the other part is, is moving forward is also important.
Correct.
Trying to find the comfortable range between the two of those isn't always easy, but.
True that.
So you figure, I get out of the service and I, like some of the after effects of post-traumatic stress disorder that they don't talk about is that, and I didn't even realize were manifestations of PTSD are the life decisions that we make. Because
explain. Not sure I'm catching.
So one of the hallmarks of post-traumatic stress disorder is a heightened awareness towards shortness of life.
Makes sense.
So when you don't really feel like you could potentially not live that long, then you start to make
crazy
heavy
decisions.
Life decisions that really don't take into consideration the implications or the consequences of those decisions. Right?
Makes sense.
So for me, one of those was my relationship with my first wife. At that time, there were probably some evidences of incompatibilities and some other things that I saw. But there were also some rationalizations that came along with that where it was like, you make a move based on where you're at right now because who the hell knows? You know what I mean? So the consequences of that, arrive in time. You might not see that at the time.
Right.
You know what I mean? But you really, like, making a decision on who to spend the rest of your life with based on the fact that my life might be shorter. You know what I mean? And you know what I mean? So, and those things don't coexist well, right? You know, so when you talk about the after effect of things like post-traumatic stress disorder, most people think about the consequences being, you know, emotional and spiritual consequences, and those certainly all hallmarks and are things that I dealt with in my path. But some of what I dealt with were also the consequences of the life decisions themselves that I had made based on those, you know, those perceptions, right? Yep. So, you know, would I be so inclined to, you know, to marry my first wife were it not for some of those things? The answer is, you know, that remains in question, but it's certainly a question worth asking.
Right.
And, you know, and a combination of that and then the path that sent me down that was already exasperated by my childhood and by my experiences before I got in the military, all got like tossed. So by the time I got out there's a little sound. By the time I got out in October of 1996, I had already been married. I'd already gotten married and got married twice because we got married. My first wife, she didn't want anybody to know that we got married because she wanted to have a big shindig. So we got quietly married so we could collect that extra married money. And then we got publicly married in 95. So, but nobody in our family or her family knew that technically we were already married, and we kept that sacrosanct so that, you know, everybody would make a big shindig over it, because if not, and that was really her, to me, you know, it didn't really matter so much, but a lot of, you know, her perceptions on the way she viewed things was, you know, outwardly how it appeared to others a lot more than maybe it did for me. And, you know, but it became pretty evident to some of my family, even in that experience in the marriage in Alaska and some other things that were some incompatibilities, family incompatibilities between us, and some of those things became, you know, more obvious, like literally long before we got to day one of being married in the eyes of everybody, but also, you know, some of the things that happened on our wedding day were like, whoa, okay. You know, clearly there's been a change in command. Right. Let's say that. Yeah. So
keep going.
But, so I got out in October 1996. You know, I, you know, packed a rider rent a truck, 24-foot rider rent a truck. I put my car inside the back of the truck, right? So I wasn't towing it. I actually found a place in San Diego where I could take the truck and back it into a bay and then drive my car up into the warehouse and drive it out and gingerly drive it into the back of the truck and just squeeze out the window.
Okay, I was just
enough so I could get out.
Opening that door.
Right? And I drove back with a guy named Hodap who would transferred to our squadron for like 3 months before I got out. So he was already short. And, you know, in the last day, I mean, literally the day he got out, he came to the squadron the next day. And I was supposed to drop him off in Oklahoma, I think, on the way back. And his hair was purple and he had a nose ring in a day.
Yeah, he ain't going.
Yeah. So no, he rode back. He put his surfboard in the back of underneath my car, and then driving back, my car bounced up and down and crushed his surfboard. You know, his fins on his surfboard. Right. But that was an interesting journey, at least half the way to Oklahoma, and then I made that last leg back to Pennsylvania to offload my vehicle and all my stuff, which wasn't really very much, to, you know, at that time, my wife, who was already staying with my parents and waiting for me to arrive. So, you know, we had, we tried our hands at a couple things. We got involved in a multi-level, which you know about, Yep. You know what I mean? Where, you know, we wanted an opportunity at something, and there wasn't a lot of job opportunities in 1996 that I could find. There was opportunities to work on aircraft, but the first offers I got were like for Sikorsky, working in Perth, Australia for $8 an hour. And I was like, I'm not going halfway around the world, newly married, to make $8 an hour working on aircraft. I wanted something different. So I answered an ad and ended up doing an interview, and which turned out to really ultimately be for a, you know, company that sold water filters and breath spray and shit like that. And we ended up investing some of our, hard saved capital into trying to get this thing off the ground, and unsuccessfully, of course. I think there was some legitimacy to what they were selling, frankly, the dream. And I'm really grateful for that, because even when it didn't work out, the dream was firmly planted. I didn't have to do what they were doing, but they were like, you should read this book called Think and Grow Rich.
Which you have in your office.
Which I have in my office. And, that's pretty much like the success Bible that I've used. I've found that you can take things that the best of information can be used to justify the intents that may not be the best of intents. You can take things, you can spin a narrative using whatever you want. And for all intents and purposes, what the information I got out of there, you know what I mean? Like what I did get, in spite of the fact that it didn't really work out, was one, a yearning for more. And two, at least in part, some seeds planted in, what potentially that blueprint could look like. That being said, there are two parts I think in Grow Rich that I always avoided. One part was one of the chapters talked about, the power of prayer, and I always avoided that. And then there was one that talked about substance abuse, and I always avoided that. Those were two things that was like,
I'm skip chapter 5,
yep,
skip chapter 9.
Right? You know what I mean? So, so after that didn't work out, we ended up buying a nice house in Lansdale, Pennsylvania, right next to where Merck had a facility that my father had worked in for many, many decades. And we think we had the intent that, that time my wife would end up working for Merck, but it didn't work out that way. And, and what ended up happening was, it was the beginning of the end of, ultimately, the demise of that relationship, because what came out, and the funny thing is that 1990, I got out in 1996. Within 3 years, we were living in that house. 1999, Dean was born. He's over there, right here, right? But what was also coming of that was that, there was some incongruency and compatibility between the two of us. And I wasn't enough of a man or self-aware enough to be able to confront it directly, so I hid from it. And the way I hid from it was that I avoided, our relationship more than anything. And, part of the amends that, I make to her today is by, being a good father to my children, although it was later in the game than I think both of us would have preferred, you know what I mean? Like, and I think, not in the interest of protecting my own viewpoint of things, you know what I mean? I did, at least in part, buy somewhat of a, maybe I don't want to say a false bill of sale. I saw what I wanted to say.
Yeah, for sure.
And a lot of it was enhanced by that post-traumatic stress disorder push that was like, you know what I mean? But then once it got real, it really was real. And that real wasn't a real that I was interested in. And frankly, I don't think she was really interested in it either. But there were other narratives that were being supported on the other end that basically, that the sacrifices that should be made should all be mine. And, and I don't think that's necessarily the way it went, because in the end she made plenty of sacrifices. You know what I mean? Like, when a family splits up and you end up with two children and you split those times, you know what I mean? Like, I became the enemy, but she also became the one that bore the burden, even if it was self-inflicted, of raising the children for the most part by herself. It felt a different narrative. That narrative was actually, look at me making all these sacrifices, but at the same time it was her signing up to make all those sacrifices. So it was kind of like, because you're not capable of, right. You know what I mean? Like, right. Well, that's a narrative that supports your agenda,
right.
You know what I mean? And, forced me into a position where for many, many years I was an alternate weekend, alternate holiday dad.
I remember,
it's just the most painful
I lived through a lot of that with you.
Painful time in my life. But also, you know what I mean? Like, it also opened up two things. One, it was, after the separation and then ultimately the divorce, you know what I mean? Like, was broke as a joke, was starting my own company, I was, and I was also, left with 12 out of 14 days in a week where I had to basically fill my time because my children lived too far away from me to be able to participate in the day-to-day. It wasn't like I was 15 minutes away. I mean, they were an hour plus in traffic each way. So it wasn't like you can scoop the kids up after school. And you know what I mean? Like it wasn't set up. Wasn't
convenient.
No, it wasn't even a matter of convenience. It wasn't practical. Right.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like it was like if you got to pick up the kids from 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock from daycare and you're an hour and 15 minutes in the middle of the day through traffic and you already work a gig, you know what I mean? Like those are,
It's almost incompatible.
And to my chagrin, because I pushed a lot about, those distances and those type of things, but I wasn't really heard. And then once feet were firmly planted in the new arrangement, then the new arrangement wasn't really indicative to me being able to participate in the level that I wanted to. And so it was incredibly painful. And, and even though I hadn't really engineered the situation specifically, or these weren't my selections, there was a lot of guilt and shame, just feeling like, knowing that I wasn't getting an opportunity to participate in raising my children at the level that I wanted to. It was just, it was a really, really difficult time for me. And, and I escaped through, I'm going to say wine, women, and song, but you know what I mean? It was really like drugs, women, and more drugs. You know what I mean? Like,
No music playing in the background.
Yeah, it might have been a little, little jams or whatever, but it was just really basically, and slowly I progressed into, a deeper and darker place, that lasted for, now there was simultaneously, I was also, in 1998, after my stint in doing the multi-level, we just bought this new house and I had to find a gig, and I answered an ad for a company that was selling it didn't say what it was for, but when I showed up at the interview, they said it was for commercial cleaning, and I almost got up and walked out because I thought it was beneath me. Right? I was like, oh, don't you know I'm like an aviation electronics technician, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I walked into a couple places with that too.
I'm like, don't you know who I am, and
right.
blah, blah, blah. But I, also had bills to pay, and, and I don't remember whether it was a child on the way yet, but, all that was what we had, a new crib or had just gotten it or whatever, and I just needed to do something. So I took this job. And
was that Capital?
Mm-hmm. I worked with them for a year. And Capital taught me about an industry that I could maneuver in, and what I, and that in my hubris that I could do better than them, right? And taught me what I didn't want, made me just mad enough that I wanted to do what they were doing, but without them.
Yep.
And but I didn't gain the level of confidence, right, by flipping them off and going to start my own gig in the traditional sense. Like, the first thing was, to start a janitorial supply business with a couple other guys that I work with. And those guys ended up being my partners in another business that I had started that I asked them to participate in. And, but in the beginning, all three of us, we kicked in $500 for toilet paper and paper towels and hand soap and trash can liners, and started selling to existing cleaning clients. And, we just kept turning it. We kicked at $1,500 and buy $2,000 worth of supplies. 2,000 became $4,000. And then sooner or later, one of the guys who I was in a partnership with found out that we could gain access to a 4,000 square foot warehouse in a place called Skipback, not far from where I lived. And we, bought out some shelving from, there used to be the predecessor to Home Depot was this place called Heckinger's. And Heckinger's went out of business, and we bought a bunch of their industrial.
They were liquidating everything they had.
Yeah, and we bought the shelves and a couple carpet machines and some floor buffers and a few other things that were going out.
The buffer tech coming back.
Yeah, yes, buffer tech live. So, and and it wasn't soon after that I realized that I didn't want to work for this company anymore, and I had more balls than brains because I really, the structure that I had outlaid to go do this other thing wasn't enough to be able to support me and a family, let alone my partners. And turned out into a situation where, we all left and we ended up duking it out with the company that we used to work for. You know what I mean? Like, we really hadn't done anything wrong, but they had decided that, they had deep pockets and they wanted to come after us. They wanted to knock us out of business because they didn't want the competition. And it ended up getting thrown out. You know what I mean? And,
I remember this, dude. I do remember this.
We ended up just being off on our own. And then the 3 partners that we had decided to be became 2. You know what I mean? Like we saw some incompatibility with at least one of the 3 of us, and we basically said to him, drew a line in the sand and said, "You go out on your own," which he did. I think a little bit to his chagrin, and frankly, you know what I mean? Like looking at it all these years later, think I probably could have done it a little differently. And
hindsight 2020.
Yeah, and then the other partner and I, we started out with this company called Patriot Facilities Management. You know what I mean? And we, first thing we realized was how hard cleaning was, because the first job or 2 that we did, we had to clean it too, because we needed all the money, every dollar. Right. Like we had, you know what I mean? So we would sell during the day, and then at night we would
meet up at one of the locations.
Yeah, just show up and then clean. And the first cleaning we did was general cleaning, which is, emptying trash and vacuuming and, you know what I mean, and cleaning bathrooms. And Lou would go clean bathrooms, and I would, empty trash and vacuum, and we would meet up, and I'll be in Scotland before ye. And we would meet up in the middle, and then the next day we would get up the next day. Well, that was 5 days a week we were doing that. And that was it was brutal, because the next day you had to get up and sell, and the next night you had to clean. So you were basically working doubles every day. Yep. And so the first thing we did was he had bought a little minivan, got rid of one of his vehicles, and because it was great, because we could throw the carpet machine that we picked up from Heckinger's, and we had a couple of floor strip machines, low speed machines, and we would so instead we realized that we could go extract the carpet and make as much money for 1 day as we did cleaning a whole place for 5 days. So then next thing we did was we're done cleaning. It was only dude, we must have cleaned for a month and a half. We were we just couldn't hang no more. So we were we would meet up and extract the carpet, and, we would meet up and, do a floor strip job, and, you know what I mean? And then we would sell. And then eventually, as soon as we could, we stopped doing the floor jobs, and we just started selling. So, we did pretty good business, and, but early on he was like, we need a bookkeeper. I think my wife would be a good bookkeeper. And I was kind of like, okay. I mean, how are I going to say no? I mean, we didn't have a bookkeeper. You know what I mean? I didn't know how to do it. You know what I mean? But I didn't really understand that the challenges that would come with it was me and you and your wife, right? You know what I mean? And even though we were 50-50 partners, it was really 50-50 partners, but at least in some way, it was like you were dealing with not 1, but 2 people. Correct. And still to this day, strangely enough, every once in a while I have a strange dream, and I'm still in business with them. Recently, just a month or 2 ago.
What's that subliminally about?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Open-ended.
But it's weird. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it wasn't like we were never at wit's end. We actually got along really well, if anything, you know what I mean? And I'm still to this day, love them from afar, you know what I mean? But at least in part, I felt like, Yoko came in to break up the band. Because at least in part, I felt like, and who am I to stand in the way of, partnerships and relationships that are husband and wife? I was just a business partner, but, but we had assimilated to the point where we had a team of some people that were working for us. We had an operations manager. We had offices in Bluebell, and we had offices apart from each other. And we had this fledgling little company. And I was good in operations, but better in sales. He was better in operations, but good in sales. We complemented each other really well. And one day, he was in his office, and we were directly across from here. Nicer offices than my attorney's offices. I mean, we were in a nice place. And I remember one day him saying, "I can't see out of one of my eyes. I don't know what's going on." And he went to the doctor, and he found out he had the precursors for MS. And that was what he was experiencing. Well, I was like, oh, shit. You know what I mean? Like, that's, messed up. And then a week or 2 later, he came to me and said, "Hey, I put up my house for sale. I'm moving to Florida." And I was like, we have business. Right. Where are you? And he said, "Well, there's a lot of business we can do in Florida." And you know what I mean? But what I felt like was, after being abandoned in my relationship with my wife, you know what I mean, in my first divorce, which I was like now well in the throes of trying to navigate my way through the painful reality of every other weekend and all. I felt like in some ways, abandoned And maybe in some other ways I felt, betrayed. And that's probably not a fair assessment for somebody who's just found out that he has a condition that could be life-threatening and wants to change his surroundings and scenery. But it was sold to me in a way where it was like, well, it's all going to be beneficial to all of us. And so within a month or two, he moved to Florida. And here I was with a 50-50 partner in a business who was in Pennsylvania with all the clients and all the business. And he was in Florida with none of the clients and none of the business. And then the idea was and half the money, but then also, you know what I mean? Like, more say-so equity because his wife was doing the books from there remotely. And you know what I mean? And slowly a resentment started to build for me that was like, well, wait a minute. You know what I mean? Like, and I would go out and sell and it was like, what am I, like somebody's prize horse? I'm going to bring in this business. And then, you know what I mean? And then we split everything even. And then there was no business coming in from Florida at all for months and then into a year and then longer. And, at the time I was playing competitive paintball and, dealing with that. And I was, slowly, little by little, I was adding to the compounding, the use of mind and mood altering substances more and more. It just kept getting worse and worse. And then I ended up, meeting some people that, that had influence or, like some female companionship that led to, that had an issue. And instead of seeing that as a problem, I saw that as a solution. And, and over time it just continued to get worse. So what the disconnect from my partner and I didn't kill 2008 did.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. You know what I mean? Like it was like, and, and suddenly it was like, hey, there's not enough money here for us to draw a salary here. There's just enough money here to pay the bills that are left. So we're going to have to go out and get jobs. And, and the first jobs that were immediately available were like selling coins for the Franklin Mint at $8 an hour. And, you know what I mean? Like, and to come from making a 6-figure income in the, in the mid, early mid 2000s, being your own boss to having to, bartend or sell coins or, you know what I mean? Door to door sell, cleaning chemicals or some of the other jobs I took in those early years were really, the intermittent space in between, an inability to grasp life on its terms. I equate it to, substance abuse is one of those strange things. It's like, look, if you want to get a firm grip on your life, you know what I mean? And the grip on your life was equated to like climbing a rock wall, and that was your life. You want chalk, like you don't want grease. Right. You know what I mean? And a lot of, substance abuse was injecting grease onto my hands. And then my grasp of life, which was the wall, was becoming ever more non-sustainable. And it got worse over time. And you know what I mean? Until eventually I reached a point where, they call it the gift of desperation. And I'd worked 4 or 5 different jobs, that had lasted in sequence a year at a time. In 2000, I think it was 2011, at the end of 2011, we officially closed Patriot Facilities Management, you know what I mean? And what I didn't know was an operations guy that I'd brought on that I considered my friend behind the scenes had negotiated a deal to take over some clients that I didn't know about and was cleaning those clients. And so basically there was money being made that whole time. It just wasn't being made by me. It had been stolen and I didn't know it. And while I was working for a company in 2012, found that out.
Sonoma.
Yeah,
I was close.
Right, you know what I mean? Like actually a guy who used to work for me called me and said, hey, you know what I mean? Like, how come you're not in business anymore? And then in that conversation, dropped the name of somebody that used to work for me that he was still working with. And then I was like, wait a minute, that guy worked with me.
Yeah, you started
like, hold up. And then eventually me and that guy are sitting down across from each other in a restaurant. And that's when he cops kind of an attitude and tells me that, you know what I mean, I don't see myself ever working for you again. And I realized that the reason why he's saying that is because he's got my money. You know what I mean? Like you know what I mean? Now, over time, I've realized that, who's more guilty, the person that steals from you, or when you are so incapable of being able to see somebody steal from you, you're basically lining them up. Like I told him too much, and I set him up for, you know what I mean? And connected him with relationships and basically gave him the rope to hang me with. And then I was mad because he hung
you with him.
Right. So, but to take away from that conversation was, I'm going back. So I relaunched, the next version of Patriot, right? But my daughter and I at the time, she'd come to stay with me, my oldest, and she said one day, how about Patriot USA? And I said, that's got to be taken. And I went and looked it up, and it wasn't. It wasn't. So, Patriot USA LLC was born, and I started, cold calling. You know what I mean? Like I started, but I was in a really bad place financially. I was in a really bad place emotionally and spiritually. You know what I mean? The disease of addiction had taken hold. And, I was thinking about putting a fucking bullet in my head. So, the hounds were coming in closer and closer from a bunch of different directions. And, at the time I met, my now wife, who lived a clean lifestyle and had a story, for what it's worth, that she never pushed on me or suggested what I should do, but, was inspirational to me. And, before I, ever embarked on a path of, cutting out all the substances, I started going to the VA in Philadelphia, and and they were. I was lucky enough to be able to connect with a NOM vet, a Navy vet, brownwater vet, missing a leg, guy by the name of Tim Owen. Rest in peace, Tim. Rest in peace, man. So Tim was in recovery. He had been clean when I first started seeing him for over 30 years. And the story was inspirational. And here he was trying to help me. And I, and he was kind, and he was quirky. And he would come in and sit in his little chair with his fan in his little office and fart and blow with the fan, with his legs sitting on the side next to him or whatever. But
right, like a cane just propped up.
Yeah,
on the
right.
desk
You know
or
what I mean?
whatever.
But I loved him, man. And
right,
you know
right.
what? And over time, we would talk, and he would know the name of my ex, or he would know the name of my wife, or he would know the name of, you know what I mean? And he knew the names of my kids and all the things I was dealing with. And, he was building a case for, post-traumatic stress disorder that I didn't even really know. Like, he was actually building out my file for my VA disability. And until eventually one day I said something to him after seeing him for many years, and he said, "Oh yeah, I got your stuff right here. I've been building your case all this time. I didn't know you were ready." And I was like, "What?" He was like, "Yeah." And he lined me up to go see the people I needed to see. And for that reason, combined with some letters that came from my commanding officer and some other people I served with, I was able to navigate my way through the process of becoming service-connected disabled. And, and that led itself to being, a service-connected disabled veteran-owned business. But I went from, cold calling, you know what I mean, and, being pretty much leashed to, staying high at all times, you know what I mean, and, chameleon, hiding it as best as I possibly could until you're with somebody that's not living that lifestyle, you know what I mean? And that was my, my now wife, seeing that remember her looking at me and being like, "Can't you just stop that just for a little while?"
Right.
And the answer was no, I can't. And that was when I started to really realize. So one day I went to a 12-step recovery meeting, and, and got my hand up, and, I've been clean ever since. It's been
like 9.5?
11.
11.5?
11 years. So, but, so I continued to sell commercial cleaning, you know what I mean, and build relationships with clients, and got back to restaurants first because it was just an area that was kind of like, I already had some existing relationships, even though they had been gone for 4 or 5 years. And, but there were people that I knew, and it was real hard, but I started and started to accumulate clients, and then those clients became bigger and bigger over time until at some point, just a year or two later, I had eclipsed what the largest I had been when I had been in my first company, and it was just basically, with a shoestring of me and and some people just helping me, and my wife and I, we were just dating at the time, but eventually we got engaged and we got married, and she had a little one when I first met her, who at the time was 3 when I turned 4 right after I met her, and that she eventually adopted her and she got my last name, and I started selling, as a company started selling, and the selling became Pennsylvania, which is where I was headquartered, and then eventually some stuff in Jersey, and then some stuff in I was going up to Manhattan, and I picked up a client in Manhattan, and then I would go down to DC. I would take the Amtrak down to DC and I would sell. And I've actually picked up some clients in DC and Virginia and Maryland, and I was going up and down, and then eventually I picked up a high-end restaurant in Miami and expanded down there, and and just state by state I started knocking them off. So in 2017, I, in the process of cold called across the hotel with the intent of selling them some commercial cleaning, right? Like I figured they probably need like the common areas in the bathrooms, and ended up talking to an HR director who said, well, could you provide housekeepers? And I thought, well, that's not that much of a stretch from commercial cleaning, what I do now. And housekeeping, like 1 or 2 people ultimately became 10, 20, 30, then 60, and, and providing people in food and beverage and in laundry and, and that type of thing. And then, and at one point doing that, they said to me, the regional GM, who I'm still connected with to this day, said, like our other staffing companies, and I realized they don't see me as a janitorial company. They see me as a staffing company. Like I'm a different company to them. So, I did business. It was tumultuous. It was a challenge with that company. They were going through financial difficulties and that type of thing. So there was a lot of time I was worried about whether or not we were going to get paid. And then it was a roller coaster ride. So my relationship with them ended right just before the pandemic hit. And then we shut it all down to, just a tiny amount, a fraction of the business we had. And it was questionable whether or not we would come out the other side. And, but what ended up happening was, a really tiny team that stayed on in some capacity to help. And, we started cold calling hotels, and, we grew what was a tiny shop into something that, was pretty substantial and expansive, quite large, in fact. And, eventually, we were doing hotels, all over the country. And so still, have the one company, Patriot, which is still doing commercial cleaning in Nevada and in Arizona and in, Missouri and in Kansas and in, and in Pennsylvania. And so, I think last we checked, it was like 13 or 14 states. And then in 2021, I decided to branch it off into several other companies with some specialties. And one thing I decided to do was to buy hotelstaff.com. And so I was like, well, I wanted my own separate company that just specialized in hospitality staffing. So now Patriot's doing commercial cleaning and that type of thing across the U.S., and Hotel Staff does hospitality staffing across the U.S. And, we've gone through some challenges, some difficulties, some hard things that we'd had to deal with, but, we've grown substantially, and, we're, well respected, we've become a competitive element in the marketplace. And, and we're positioned to grow yet again. Some changes that have happened recently mean that, there's some really interesting things happening on the horizon.
So tell me a story, man. You've talked to me about this a little bit, but
okay,
you've always been like front-endy, right? Business developy, kind of sales, right? You're kind of the front end visionary of everything that you've put together. Right. And at one point here recently, we were having a discussion because I always thought that was like, you know, that's your sweet spot. That's right. Like how you were, you know, grown and developed. I mean, you walked into the stereo store and the car place and was like, listen, I know how to sell. If you learn how to sell something, you can sell anything, right? So in my head, I always thought that's what you're about. But you told me a story recently about how you had to kind of convince yourself to play in that ball game.
Right. So yeah, that's a a misnomer. See, I grew up with low self-esteem and low self-worth, right? You know what I mean? Like, maybe not so much from my home life. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I was really well protected, well shielded at home, but the people around me, my peers, were cruel, and they are for all children. You know what I mean? Like, in the interest, I was not spared, you know, what many other children were spared, but was really ill-equipped. You know what I mean? And, you know, when you're an only child for the first 10 years of your life, you know what I mean? Like, kids who have, like, we've talked about it, like you with your older sisters or whatever, like, you kind of learn about conflict and how to duke it out. You know what I mean? Like, maybe not physically duke it out, but you just learn about, was ill-equipped for anything that had anything to do with conflict at all, completely. So, and when you're even in a very, very young age, the first thing you deal with other children is conflict, ridicule, like all these things. And I was underdeveloped for that. So, and I don't think I ever in my life ever really caught up for that. You know what I mean? So, and what it ended up being in the latter part of my childhood was just being ostracized or feeling ostracized, you know? And so, but I was also, as my mother and father would say, inoculated with a record player needle. They couldn't shut me the fuck up as a kid. So, you know, so I was born with a gift of gab, right? Genuinely interested in other people, right? You know, and Napoleon Hill would talk about a pleasing personality, right? Yep. And, you know, I'm not hard to deal with. I'm not hard on the eyes. I'm just all the way around, just kind of like easy on the front end to interface with people. But behind the scenes, wrangling the level of self-confidence stuff to push myself past that boundary to go interface with people, when in the end I don't feel like I'm shit, I'm ever going to be shit. You know, it required a tremendous amount of just a fight, you know what I mean, between, you know, the convincing myself, you know, that, and there would be times where I would get up in the morning, you know, with a couple dollars in my pocket, but damn near broke and against the wall, and drive an hour to go sell somewhere, to be in a new area, because I'm going to do cold calls and walk-ins, and then be paralyzed to get out of my vehicle. Just sit. I have a picture somewhere of me. I remember calling Robin, you know what I mean, like teary-eyed, and being like,
I don't know if I can do this, right?
You know what I mean? What's wrong with me? You know what I mean? And it was really just a matter of, you know, the pushing past this. I don't even call it fear, just discomfort. You know what I mean? Like, you know, that I'm not even necessarily sure if it was ever told to me that, you know, walking in places as a stranger and starting asking questions is rude or whatever. It just was abnormal to me. So, but everything that I've ever done has been on the other side I've been uncomfortable with. And
funny that you say that.
And all the life that I enjoy now has all the relationships that have been developed, you know what I mean, would be all for naught had I not pushed myself through. I'm not a person who came with a silver spoon. I'm not a person that was connected with relationships to start. So every relationship that's ever really kindled into relationships that have led to more has really started from the mustard seed that was, you know, reaching out to somebody that I'd never talked to before, right? You know, and frankly, and you and I have been talking about this over the last couple of days since we've been spending some catch-up time, you know what I mean? Like, you know, you pointed at your head as your own worst enemy, you know, me too. And a lot of that is really convincing myself, why not me?
Right.
Why not now?
Right.
You know, full disclosure, you know what I mean? Like dusting over a conversation like that to, you know, get to some level of an endpoint, probably does a disservice to the tremendous amount of hurdles and decisions, good and bad, that I made. You know, many more bad than good, frankly. I was kind of surprised that I survived so many things that I did to get to this point. You know, for every, you know, I think a lot of times, you know, the challenge is to think that just because you won, you're always going to win, or just because you lost, you're always going to lose. And, you know, one thing Napoleon Hill talks about is the seed of every adversity is equal to an equal and greater gain.
Right.
And, you know, looking back over all the things that, you know, and we said this, I think I said to you yesterday, you know what I mean? Like, you might like where I am now or want to be where I am now, but most people wouldn't survive how I got here, you know? And that's because, you know, and luckily enough, I keep fantastic records. So, you know, we could go back and talk about the thousands and thousands and thousands of things that I tried that didn't work, you know? And I'm still doing it to this day, you know? You know, this podcast, for all intents and purposes, is the after effect of trying something new,
right,
to see whether it works or not, you know? And,
right.
And in all fairness, I think it has, you know what I mean? Like, we've been able to connect with some people. We've been able to tell some other people's stories. And that was really ultimately the goal. The goal wasn't for me to be in the seat. Never really thought about it until other people started coming at me and saying, you should be in the seat. But you know, the leadership gold, you know, thing that you and I do, you know, those were experiments that are already in process and, you know, and fledgling, but doing well, I think, for where they're really at. And, you know, it's like we talked about this morning, you know, just like we talked about for like America itself.
Right.
It's the grand experiment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And everything that I'm doing right now is still in an experimental stage, right? You know, it might and is far more substantial than it was when I started, but, it's an experiment that manifests another experiment. Like it continues to, you know, because I have to continue I have to continue to try new things. And from time to time, I go back and look at, archivally, I look at just all different types of things that didn't work out. Like sometimes I have to do that. Sometimes I have to look back at, you know, a power greater than me and say, okay, you know what I mean? Like, look at all these things that you might not have survived, you know, overdose or a car accident or a flight deck crash or, you know what I mean? Like, you know, bad decisions, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. You know, the girl that I dated that, you know, is doing life for murder. You know, there are a lot of things that, right? You know what I mean?
Talk about that.
Yeah, there are a lot of things. There were a lot of decisions that I made that could have led to consequences that would either land me in jail or dead, you know, based on my poor decision-making prowess. And that's not where I am now, because I'm trusted with, you know, with a very substantial amount of property, both intellectual and physical, and the trust of many, you know, brands and organizations that look to me.
Organizations, all kinds of stuff.
Right. But was not all for the best of decision making in process. And I will say that luckily for me, in those early informative years, it didn't lead to anything that for all intents and purposes hurt anybody else. Most of those bad decisions I made were mine, and I bore the consequences of. Right. I'm lucky in that regard. I mean, through a deeper exploration to a 12-step process, you get to see, you know what I mean, like where those impacts really were, and start to mend those fences and make right what was left hanging out or wrong. And but I'm lucky to say that, you know, that the amends that needed to be made for the most part have been made, and that you know, I don't spend a lot of time looking over my shoulder with regret about what I did wrong or what was. You know, I've come to peace with that.
Yeah, that's important, man.
The other side, you know, the anxiety that comes from looking at what could potentially happen in the future is a totally other matter. And that requires a lot more wrangling, and that requires a lot more prayer and meditation and conscious contact with a power greater than me. Those things all require me to calibrate at a much higher level, to stay in this moment, to stay in today. You know what I mean? Like, you know, to look at the history of things that I didn't think that would work out, that worked out like almost like a power greater than me, that God calibrated, God conspired in my favor. Right? You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, look at that. You know what I mean? Like, I thought that was going to be disastrous. And in fact, you know what I mean? Like, it worked out.
Probably better than you thought.
Yes. God don't need my help.
Correct.
Right? So, you know, but transparency to this day, I still deal with, you know, no matter how much growth, no matter how much work I do on myself, no matter how much money, property, prestige, no matter how much success that I achieve, you know what I mean? There's a certain amount of imposter syndrome that naturally comes along with that. It requires an amount of calibration to looking at, you know what I mean? That, you know, to looking at my track record, to looking at the things that I survived. I should be dead in a box a long time ago. Should have put me in a box a long time ago. And
you've done enough stuff to be in a box.
Yes, yes, many times. And there have been plenty of times where the smoke cleared, and I was like, "Damn, I'm still lucky on this one."
Right.
You know what I mean? Like yet again. But then again, I also say from time to time, nobody's that fucking lucky. You know what I mean? Like, you know, can't possibly be luck. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
Yeah. So there must be some plan for me. You know what I mean? Beyond, you know, what I can see. And, you know, what I continue to do is, you know, find ways to give back. This was an opportunity to be able to tell other people's stories. Right. And as much as it's cool to, you know, talk about, you know, for all intents and purposes, what everybody's favorite subject is, which is themselves. I don't hate talking about me. You know what I mean? What I really enjoyed is, you know, how compelling it is to peel back other people's stories and to find out more about them. Not with just the intent of the fun of it, although if it ain't fun, I don't want to do it, but really because in those stories lies hope.
Correct.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, you know, that volcano, you know what I mean? Like the concept really behind it. And I thought when we first set it up, I was like, are people really going to get it? I remember talking to Dean being like, do you think people will get Dancing on a Volcano? Do you know what? He was like, well, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when you told me, I was like, makes sense.
Yeah, you know. But the dancing part is, you know, and what I found, here's the thing, right? Everybody has different levels of volcano, and everybody has different types of dance, right? And in my head, in the beginning, it was like, well, you had to have like an ultra volcano story, or you had to have an ultra dance story, or a combination of both to really make sense. And then I realized that, you know, everybody has a volcano story, and then everybody has a dance. And sometimes the volcano story is the fact that, you know, because every heartbeat is basically flirting with the death of no heartbeat, right? You know what I mean? So everybody, every moment of every day is on the edge of the volcano. You know what I mean? The volcano really is, you know, for all intents and purposes, it's like, you know, the mortality that we all face, and everybody takes a turn at the wheel for, you know, what, you know, as my first therapist would say, the vicissitudes of life, the hardship.
And the hardships,
yeah. Right. And, you know, part of my thought process sometimes is, well, you know, if it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. And then other times it's like, it always happens. So when is it going to happen? You know what I mean? Like, and trying to get in the middle of just being like surrendering to the day and enjoying the day, right? And making it to midnight, not wrecking myself, not using any mind or mood altering substances with the exception of coffee and occasionally a good cigar, right? You know, and embracing, you know, the life that I have and the friendships that I enjoy and, you know, people that I love and, you know, and seeing the blessings, you know, the many gifts that, you know, that life has brought me and not feeling entitled as though I'm supposed to have them, but rather just enjoying them while they're here.
Right.
And knowing that, one thing that's guaranteed to change. And so it's all fleeting. One day, all this will be gone. You and me and him and this room, it'll all be gone.
Right.
So, when you see it like that, you start to really see that,
you see it different.
We have a responsibility to take life for what it's worth and to enjoy it in the now. And the thing that I've learned from the people that I spoke about who passed in service of this country, and the many who have died, one thing you learn about recovery is they tell you in the beginning, you better buy yourself a nice fucking black suit, because we bury many.
Yeah.
We bury many.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes, many in just a year.
Yeah.
And so I have a responsibility, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I have a responsibility to show what's possible. You know what I mean? Like, to show other people that, that if they're in the storm, their volcano story isn't the only one. And that, frankly, everybody's volcano story is a little different. The similarity between them all is the thread of the gift of desperation, right? How you got there isn't as important as the desperation itself, right? That's my responsibility. And then my other responsibility is to dance.
So you recently had somebody on the Dancing on a Volcano. I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 people ago, but he actually went into a bit of a conversation about the dance.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? That was the last one I actually watched, and I was like, yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was like, man, bang.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He kind of nailed that for me.
Yeah, living in joy, right?
Yep.
Is to dance.
Yep.
And I think that's part of, at least in part, where I've disconnected a little bit from what the dance is supposed to look like, because my first impressions of dance are calibrated based on my views of what I think the world is, or what success is, and that's bullshit, right? You know what I mean? Like, that's what it is for me. But the human experience is so different, as humans are different. We're all similar in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? Like, we all have difficulties and challenges in the edge of the volcano. Like, we all go there, and hopefully, you know what I mean? Like, we experience joy. And, and the reason this exists is because there are people that are on the edge of the volcano that don't know the joy's coming.
Correct.
Right? You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that's, the reason why I was compelled to switch seats with you and actually share this is to share with others that, if you're in a tough spot, hang on. The good shit's coming. Right? You got to stay in faith and get in the middle of the herd, and the good shit's coming. Thank you, brother. Love you, man. Love you.
You want to lock this down?
Fucking right. Dancing on a Volcano, Season 2, Episode 2, which would be episode what, 9? 9? Episode 9. With my friend and brother, Dave Daniels, who I love deeply. And, that's about as powerful as they come right there. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean?
For sure.
Yeah, to walk out with some tears in your eyes, you got to the right spot. So I hope if you're watching this and you're listening to this and you're in a dark place, just, make a mention in the comments, Don't carry it. Don't carry the burden alone. All right? Can't get through life alone, and none of us are alone. The human experience is an experience of being connected, and it's a powerful thing, but we need that resource. And, I've been to some dark places, and I can't necessarily say I have the solution for everything, but, you're not alone, and there are other people who care about you. So, please, share, dancing on a volcano with others. The website is DOAVolcano.com. And then, of course, like and subscribe here. And please share us with everybody. You never know when we're going to help somebody who's in a dark place. And, that's really what all this is about, sharing the hope and the experience that good things are possible. So thank you, Dave. Love you, brother.
Thank you, brother.
All right, cool. That's it. We done.